Esther is here now. Good evening and welcome to the Lompoc City Council meeting. All of you out there in the audience, that would be one of you who is not sitting in the front row. And now we'll have roll call.
Councilmember Martner.
Present.
Councilmember Costa.
Present.
Councilmember Lingle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Starbuck.
Present.
Mayor John Lynn.
Here. And now for our one person in the audience who will be required to come forward for oral communication. She's shaking her head no. Okay. Seeing no one rise, we'll close that. And we will be going to a closed session in the utility conference room with two items. One, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, the City Council will meet with its labor negotiators to instruct them regarding negotiations with the Lompoc Police Officers Association. And number two, a conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to Subdivision C of Section 54956.9, two matters. We'll see you at 7. Good evening. Welcome back to the council meeting. City Attorney, report from closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. Both items were discussed, and there's no reportable action.
Okay, and if you'd rise, and Robert Key. Where are you, Robert? Our invocation speaker. Come on down. If you'd all rise, please.
Father, I come before you and I thank you so much for this incredible opportunity that you've given to us to hear your voice, to listen to your counsel, and to lead this great city of Lompoc. We can only do this as we ask your blessing through the authority of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. God bless you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it was my pleasure last on the 19th to make two presentations of proclamations at the Elks Lodge to the Public Safety Night sponsored by the past exalted rulers. And one was to Leniel G. Garza, Jr., honoring him as the Lompoc Elks Police Officer of the Year for 2012, and to John Moore, honoring him as the Lompoc Elks Firefighter of the Year for 2012. And then additionally, the Elks Lodge made presentations to many other agencies, including the District Attorney's Office, the Air Police, the California Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, in each case for an Officer of the Year. And then this evening it is my pleasure to make two presentations, one of which I already did once, but we got it on the wrong date, so we're going to do it again. So we'll start out with Sylvia and company. Come on down.
Oh, thank you.
Whereas the Benevolent and Protected Order of Elks has designated the week beginning May 6th as Youth Week to honor America's junior citizens for their accomplishments and to give fitting recognition of their services to the community, the state, the nation, and whereas Lompoc Lodge 2274 will sponsor an observance during that week in tribute to the junior citizens of this community, and whereas no event could be more deserving of our support and participation than one dedicated to those young people who represent the nation's greatest resource and who, in the years ahead, will assume the responsibilities for advancing our society, and whereas our youth need the guidance, inspiration, and encouragement which we alone can give them in order to develop those qualities of character essential for future leadership to go forth and serve America, and Whereas to achieve this worthy objective, we should demonstrate our partnership with youth, our understanding of their hopes and aspirations, and a sincere willingness to help prepare them in every way for the responsibilities and opportunities of citizenship. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim the week of May 6th to 12th, 2012 as Youth Week, and urge all citizens to participate wholeheartedly in its observance. Step right up.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you for the opportunity to receive this proclamation. We take great pride in the youth of our community. Next week is Youth Week. We recognize students in reading programs in the elementary level, and they have an ice cream social for the ones that passed with 85% of the tests they take after they read. Next week, we'll also have a dinner for our Student of the Year program. It's a scholastic achievement, not only a scholastic achievement, but a community involvement. We have the Boys and Girls Club, of course. We recognize the drug-free program for them. We have Kids Night at the Elks, where you bring your children, they get movie and a dinner. In October, we have our dictionary program, where we raise money for approximately 900 dictionaries to be distributed to all the third graders, and it's for them. They can keep and take them home and keep them forever. And I could go on, but I won't. But we're very proud to be involved in the youth of the community. Thank you.
The chief kicked us to the curb, huh? He did. Oh, man. All right. A proclamation for National Police Week and Police Officers Memorial Day. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls as National Police Week. And whereas the members of the Lompoc Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of residents of Lompoc, and whereas I didn't turn mine off either, whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties and responsibilities, hazards and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and the members of the Lompoc Police Department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the Lompoc Police Department unceasingly provide a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, John H. Lynn, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, call upon the citizens of Lompoc and upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 13th to 19th as National Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies and observances to commemorate law enforcement officers past and present who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and the security of all people. I further call upon all citizens to observe May 15th, 2012 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of duty, and to recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, citizens of Lompoc, thank you for recognizing Police Officer Memorial Day and Memorial Week. Over the last decade, an officer has died in the line of duty every 53 hours nationwide. These men and women stood in the gap on behalf of each of us as modern-day heroes protecting and preserving our way of life. The President has declared May 15th as National Peace Officer Memorial Day to honor law enforcement officers who have given their lives in service to their communities throughout the United States. Thousands of officers, family members, and dignitaries will gather at the National Memorial in Washington, D.C. to honor the 163 law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty in 2011. 76 already to date in 2012 have died. The name of 19,660 fallen law enforcement officers are engraved at the memorial as a permanent testament to their dedication and service. 2 officers who previously served in the Lompoc Police Department are memorialized at the National Peace Officer Memorial in Washington, D.C. Officer Richard May was shot and killed in the line of duty January 7, 2006, while serving the East Palo Alto Police Department. Officer May was formerly a police agent with the Lompoc Police Department and served our community in various assignments for 14 years. Officer May was 38 years old when he died. Deputy Frank Trejo, who was shot and killed in the line of duty March 3, 1995, while working with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Trejo had served the Lompoc community as an officer with the Lompoc Police Department for 8 years between 1969 and 1977. Deputy Trejo was 58 years old when he died. We also pause to remember Agent Christopher Keys, who died January 12, 2007. Although his death was not in the line of duty, he served our community well for 12 years as a reserve officer, patrol officer, traffic officer, detective, supervisor, and as a narcotics officer. Agent Keys died at 38 years old. Today we remember these officers who were cut down in the prime of life. But we should also remember the thousands of officers who at this very moment stand ready to defend our freedom, our property, and put themselves in harm's way for our benefit. When one of them falls, a part of our community is taken with them. The Lompoc Police Department will be participating in Police Week activities throughout the county. And a year and a half ago, I had the honor of being able to go to the Police Memorial in Washington, D.C., and to be able to stand and to be able to actually do the the pencil scribe for Rich May's name where it is on the memorial, and very moving. We had 275 members of our National Academy, the FBI Academy, that were given an opportunity to speak, to say something, to read the name of an officer that worked for their agency that was killed in the line of duty. And over the course of about an hour and a half, officers from the various departments got up and said something regarding somebody from their agency that had died. So very moving, and it affects police agencies all over the country, small departments, big departments. So we thank you, City Council, for recognizing this tonight and for what you do for us in our city. Thank you.
City Administrator's report.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, audience and viewers, thank you for this opportunity to share a couple of items tonight. I received a letter of April 13th from the Arbor Day Foundation congratulating the City of Lompoc Electric Utility on achieving the Tree Line USA recognition for the 10th year in a row. And I would like to read the letter. Dear Ms. Barcelona, I write to congratulate City of Lompoc Electric Utility on achieving Tree Line USA recognition for the 10th year in a row in honor of your sustained commitment to proper tree care and maintenance while continuing to meet service objectives. Trees make our communities more livable, increase property values, and help keep our air and water clean. Plus, trees conserve energy, which is especially important to utility providers as peak demand is reduced. Your utilities' effort in meeting Treeline USA requirements, training your workers in quality tree care practices, educating the public about planting trees for energy conservation, and helping customers to plant appropriate trees near utility lines not only helps to provide beautiful trees for the future, but also results in long-term operational savings for your utility. The Treeline USA program is made possible through the Arbor Day Foundation in cooperation with the National Association of State Foresters. And we have sent your recognition materials to your State Forester's office, which will coordinate additional recognition in your state and community. Again, congratulations on receiving this national recognition for your forestry program. Best regards, Dan Lambie. And so at this time, I would congratulate and commend Utility Director Ron Stassi, the Utility City Electric Division staff, Public Works Director Larry Bean, and Urban Forestry Manager Cindy McCall on achieving this prestigious recognition from the Arbor Day Foundation for the 10th year in a row. And Mr. Mayor and council members, I would also advise council that in response to council's desire to work from computer tablets for council meetings in an effort to convert to a paperless council agenda, Jeff Collins of the city's IS division is at present configuring the Dell computer tablets for council's use in the near future. And City Clerk Stacey Alvarez will coordinate the training sessions with council the week of May 14th through the 19th, and following which each council member will be assigned a computer tablet, and staff will begin to phase in the electronic distribution of council agenda and staff reports and attachments, and staff is excited to have this new tool available and appreciates council's vision and their patience during this transition period to a new council agenda process. I would also respectfully request that City Council will pull item 5 on your consent calendar. It's the award of project number FY07S2, U Street and San Miguelito Channel Pedestrian Bridge Replacement Project. Public Works Director Larry Bean advised me today that there is a utility relocation component of this project for which the federal dollars will not be available, and thus a budget adjustment must be submitted to fund this component of the pedestrian bridge. And council can anticipate that this item will come back to you at a future agenda. And lastly, I would like to advise council and give an update regarding the city's contract with Urban Futures to complete a report on the city's loans to LHCDC. Staff has been notified recently that Urban Futures needs more time to complete the contract work, and advising the work would be completed by mid-June. However, Urban Futures has agreed to attend the council meeting on May 15th to give a presentation update on the work as it is at this time, and allow council to ask any questions, and they will answer your questions. So staff will continue to follow up with Urban Futures in hopes of receiving the final work sooner. However, it is best to ensure that their final work is agendized. We would ask that you waive the 11-day draft agenda requirement for this item.
Everyone okay with waiving the 11th day draft? Yes? Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have no other announcements or requests.
I have one thing I'll share. I received an email Friday from the Lompoc Unified School District. Good news there. They were able to receive preliminary approval for the grant and the assumption is that the final approval will follow for the compressed natural gas unit, and thanked us for our letter of support. So good news for them and us. Okay. Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Barcelona, if you, the tablets that we're receiving, just so I can clarify it with the public, this project will be saving the city, if I recall, the figure $5,000 a year comes to mind, but it's thousands of dollars a year, and the cost of paper, printing, and distribution, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's
Thank you.
on top of purchasing the computers, $5,000 a year. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Nope. Okay. Oral communication. This is your opportunity to come and talk to us about anything that's not on the agenda, or if you can't stay for the agenda item, you're welcome to talk to us about it now, but if you can stay, it's better, because then we'll be remembering what you're talking about when we're working on the item. Anybody got something? Come on down.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Kathy Schmersler. I'm a resident. That help? Okay. I'm a resident of Lompoc, and I'm the acting chair of MarketableU.org. As I said when I was here the last time, that we were going to open our lab if the paint dried and the carpet was done on April 30th. In fact, yesterday morning, we opened our lab to our first students. As we speak, I have students in class currently learning Word, Excel, and Spanish. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I come bearing gifts for you all. I have 3 different gifts for you, and no, it's not Foster's. Okay? The first one is our brochure, which outlines a little bit about our organization. Also on the inside, gives you a brief description of the courses that we offer. So I have one of those for each one of you. Also tonight, I have your invitation. The first invitation is being handed out to our grand opening, June the 2nd, from 1 until 5. We will have music, entertainment, and you will also be able to experience the lab. This is my favorite one. Each one of you will receive what we call the Marketable You Information Bullet. Actually, it's not really a bullet. It's a USB drive or thumb drive, flash drive. On this drive there are several things. First of all, there's a copy of our application. So if you're out and about and somebody has a printer and needs an application, you can print it on the spot. It's a keychain also. There's also a PowerPoint presentation explaining Marketable You, what classes are offered. There's a video explaining Rosetta Stone. There's also a video explaining lynda.com, the learning center that we're using. Startup costs in an Excel spreadsheet for you, and an additional a video that also explains a little bit more about lynda.com, like I said, the service we are using for our clients. So I have these for you tonight. City staff for me.
Captain, it does look like a bullet. You better check this out.
Like a 338 Lacula.
Thank you all.
Councilmember Starbuck.
You know, I've got this training available, but I don't see tablets for dummies on here.
Actually, Mr. Starbuck, there are classes, I believe there are 5 of them, with a minimum of 15 to 20 on tablet computers. You're welcome to print out the application.
There's hope for us. There's hope for us.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Brent. This is Charles. We're from the Lompoc Disc Golf Club for Lompoc, and we want to present...
You have to say your last name.
Yeah. Hamner.
I'm Charles Summer.
You can lift the microphone, too, tall guys.
We're tall, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we came here to present you guys a little gift from us for helping us out, what we're doing and supporting us, and we have discs for every single one of you guys. Except for these are the base part, stamp logos, discs. So there's only 200 pages. We're only down to like 20, so I'm giving you one.
Each disc has a unique stamp on it. It has Beatty Park and then a disc flying into a basket.
Considering the mayor got one at the opening day, his got jacked off his desk. We gave him one, we all committee members signed it. So if you ever see this on the course, it's his disc. Mayor, thank you very much for your help. Charles, no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else?
I'll bring it back down a little bit here. Rob Key, resident of Lompoc, lead pastor of Generations United. And I just wanted to, I'm going to read this, then I'll give it to you, Stacy, okay? I just wanted to thank the council for their representation at the grand reopening of the newly redesigned and reorganized YMCA. I'm not here on official representation, but I am on the board of directors of the YMCA. And it was great to see Councilmember Ashley there. And for those of you that haven't been to the newly redesigned Y, it's awesome. They got some incredible programs. And just the fact that you were there to show your support was very much appreciated by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Bob and I couldn't make it. We were on the other end of the country doing city business. Okay, anyone else? One more. Come on down. Nope. He's pulling in and parking. All right. Seeing Dwayne rise. Come on, Dwayne. That's all right. We'll throw our discs around up here while you're coming.
Dwayne Holmdahl from Lompoc, and I've been up there throwing discs, and it's very interesting, very tiresome, so you better be ready to go. I came here tonight mainly to congratulate the council and city staff for putting together a facility that we had a grand opening on Friday. That facility we're going to have down there at that end of town will be something major for the city of Lompoc. Anybody that hasn't had a chance to go through the new center, the senior center and community center, are missing something. It will also bring people in. I know the staff's already been talking to hotels to bring them up and get them involved into it. I talked to some people in Santa Maria yesterday and told them about it. I said, oh, a new convention center. The one great thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and I kept telling them about, is there's parking. Everybody usually complains this city builds something and don't have the parking, but we as a business have to have all the parking. That has parking, and the facilities are going to be well used and can have a lot of it. So I think now it's advertising and bringing it out, but that facility is fantastic. So I want to just come down here to congratulate you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Anyone else? Okie doke. We'll close oral communication and come back to the council to review the consent calendar. I will be pulling item number 6 so that we can have a little discussion on that down the road a ways. If no one objects, I'll put it after item 7 because there's some people here to speak to it. And I don't think it's going to take a long time, but I just want the public to know where we're spending their money. And are there any other items a council member would like to pull? Seeing none, let me read the consent calendar. Approval of the minutes for April 3rd and April 17th. Approval of expenditures, payroll, $1,011,000, voucher registers, $437,000, voucher register, $368,000. If there's an item there related to Smitty's Towing or any of my businesses, I abstain. Number 3, approve renewal of the agreement with the County of Santa Barbara for animal control services. That was a 5% increase, City Administrator? Okay, over the prior year, and the prior year before that, or last year, there was no increase. Number 4, adopt ordinance, the final reading of 1583 regarding registered sex offender residence prohibitions. And that would be it for that, and I would accept a motion. Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I move to approve the consent calendar.
And a second.
So move.
Mr. Mayor, that's with pulling the
Number
4 and
6.
6.
Or 5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Yes. 5 is continued and 6 is moved beyond 7. Okay, is there any further discussion at this time? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you. And now moving to item 7, the council appointment to the Planning Commission. This is Councilmember Martner's appointment. Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank the 3 applicants that put in applications for the Planning Commission. And at this point in time, I'd like to thank the 3 of them for their interest in getting into this commission at a time in which it's going to require a lot of work because there is a lot of meetings coming up. So I really commend everybody that applied for showing the interest to be involved, heavily involved in this issue. Hard decision, but I have decided that I would like to nominate Mr. Hammonds, who is here present tonight, for the nomination as a planning commissioner.
Terry, did you want to say anything? No, everything's fine. Okay, thank you. And could I have a second, please, for the nomination?
I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay, and it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion from the council? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Congratulations, Terry. You've now got a full-time job instead of that part-time job you had on the Economic Development Committee. Okay, and now we'll move to item number 6. And item number 6 has 2 components. The first one is not necessarily the one I wanted to hear a little bit more about, but I think we could take just a moment. And which one of you disc golf guys wants to say a word? Charles, you've been kicked.
Of the disc golf course?
This is with regard to the allocation of the money and what you're going to use it for.
Oh, okay. The money,
$3,400.
The money we would be receiving would be to purchase baskets and install tee pads for each basket purchased on the south side of Beatty Park.
And this is for the purchase of materials. You guys are doing all the work.
We're going to do all the labor, and it's just to make the purchases.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. And this will make it is it a certified course then for competition?
With 18 holes on the course, it can be Professional Disc Golf Association approved for tournaments in the future, which could bring extra revenue to the city.
And is that the intention of your organization?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
And so that's it.
That's
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, that was the easy one.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're going to have a little staff presentation on the pool timer system, but I don't know who's going to talk to us. Da-da-da-da.
Mr. Mayor, council members, this item is put together from council requests that were made last meeting. As was discussed, the first one was about using some covenanting money that had been held for a couple decades to use that for a usable and useful project. The other one was a request to look at AB 1600 fees to purchase and install a scoreboard timer system at the Aquatic Center to enhance the ability to get competitions there and to make it more of a component of the Economic Development Committee's desire to bring more people into the community. I don't have very much information on the specifics of the timer system itself. If you have questions about that, Joanne Plummer is here if you have specific questions. I did look at the AP 1600 funding mechanism. Basically, I took a look at the report that was done in 2003. It appears that the money that we're recommending to be spent is an eligible activity of AB 1600 fees from recreation purposes. So that in itself is allows us to authorize the expenditure of these funds. So it's not, we're not approving the purchase of any of the items right now. We're just authorizing the appropriations for the future purchase of items. So.
You have a question for Brad? Okay. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. You may not have this information offhand, but what would that leave account 24870799264 building and facilities total remaining balance?
The AP 1600 report that we did in December itemized out each of the individual fund balances, for lack of a better term, of each component. And I believe it had around $175,000 in that fund before this, so it'd be roughly 130 or so after this.
Thank you.
Okay, Joanne, you want to tell us about what we're... Oh, sorry, Bob.
That's what I was going to do. I was going to ask Joanne or Don Palmerville. I thought I saw Don up there to talk to us about the timer.
Thank you. Well, the timing system that we're looking at is a Colorado timing system. That's the brand. We have evaluated all the different systems that are out there. The Colorado seems to be the most reliable system available to our users. We're looking at something that will serve not only our swim competitions, but also water polo competitions. When our swimmers compete here in Lompoc, they have timers at the edge of the pool with 3 different stopwatches, and they take the average of those stopwatches. At probably 95% of the pools that they travel to compete, you have the stopwatches as the backup, but you have the full electronic system with the touch pads where it will display lane 1 swimmer just swam a 1:20:54. Lane 6 swimmer came in second place, and it tells all your audience what's happening. These types of systems are required for us to bid for any type of significant competition. Last week we had league prelims for the leagues that our schools are in held in Santa Maria. We could have had those prelims here. The prelims for another local league were held at Arroyo Grande High School, and everybody that walked through that door was charged $5 to come watch, and there were 6 schools competing both at the JV and the varsity level. Those types of events we could bid for and we could fight for because we have an ideal facility. We cannot do it with the system we have in place now. The water polo competitions will also be able to have the score clock running and the shot clocks running with the score. The scoreboard could feature, if we chose to sell the ad, a certain business name or company name or just City of Lompoc on there. We've actually had discussions to actually bid that out each year, so a company might pay each year a stipend to the Aquatic Center budget to have their name on that score clock each year. So we're still looking and evaluating. The one thing about the system that staff has spec'd out is it has all the bells and whistles that we need, but it doesn't have an enormous amount of bells and whistles because we are very concerned with maintenance of anything that we put into that facility. So we are looking at the one that will best fit our needs for today and tomorrow, as well as one that will be the most easily maintained for the facility staff.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I want to bring this to a bigger context. In the last meeting when the Economic Development Committee came and talked to us about the vision of Lompoc and priority things to do, one of the things that was brought about was to try to promote the Aquatic Center for events, competition events. And I guess I have a basic question. You just referred to some events. How many people do you usually get in these events as far as, attendance?
There is a variance to the types of events that we can attract. We can attract more regular competitions that we see all the time right now in our facility, the different league competitions. We've seen an expansion of not just Lompoc and Cabrillo hosting swim meets at our pool and water polo competitions, but also San Ynez and some Santa Maria schools as well coming because they like the indoor, they can count on the weather, and we can keep the sun out of their goalies' eyes. In addition, what we're looking at is expanding it further, going for those larger competitions to take our local high school teams to the CIF competitions and bidding for those competitions, as well as the league preliminary competitions and finals that are taking place this week. On the larger scale, we are working with our swim teams in our Tsunami swim team, the Santa Maria swim team, and swim teams in the valley, as well as water polo teams that are club teams. Those teams practice year-round, and they travel throughout California to a variety of competitions. We want to bid for those competitions to bring those teams to Lompoc. It is a bid process. You have to have all your tools in place before your application could even be considered, and they do bid approximately 1 year out.
Great, thank you. I'm still asking the question, what kind of attendance are we talking about? And I am actually leading it to what is the maximum occupancy of the aquatic center. So how big can a competition be? What is it that we can provide? That's really what I was asking, the bottom line. Is it 200 people, or is it a 500 people event? Or is it a 50 people event?
The capacity of the amount of events would be contingent on whether or not we're having a 1-day or a 3-day event. So it's all relative. In the facility, we've just worked with our local fire department to increase our facility capacity. It was originally set at 300, and it has been increased to, I believe, just over 700 for in the facility at one time. Swim meets and water polo competitions, I believe Councilmember Costa had raised the question during that discussion with the Economic Development Committee as to what about camping, because a lot of the teams will quote-unquote camp, which is setting up a 10-by-10 easy up in a parking lot or outside, and those teams congregate there until it's time for their competition. We did hold a pentathlon at the Aquatic Center that had probably 250 swimmers, just local swimmers, and their families, and we saw about 400 to 500 people in the facility all around the competition pool, and then camped out on the patio as well. So the number that we are at for fire code standards is different than what the facility can actually hold when you have people in the pools. So we have looked at the camping component, and we would designate parking spots in the parking lot that are specifically aquatic center parking spots, because we'll have overflow parking in the high school parking lot, and then those that choose to camp can do so out there. We'll also make the patio available for those campers too, so they're not necessarily in the facility but outside.
So you're basically saying that we could hold up to 500, 700 type
Correct.
of attendance competitions or
Correct.
events at the
And the swimmers, based on my attendance at a swim meet this last weekend, the swimmers come and go, or the swimmers stay, but the parents come and go throughout the day, and you have different family members that come depending on where those swimmers are coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Joanne. I know Don has something to say. He's the fireball of this.
How we doing?
Don't forget to say your name.
Well, this is Don Palmerville. The one thing that we haven't even mentioned so far is, well, first of all, it's an exciting thing to have these swim meets because it's going to bring thousands of people a year. And the timers will be paid for probably within the first 2 or 3 years of having these swim meets. And this doesn't touch on the high school swim meets or any concession stands that we may open up inside the facility. So these are just dollars that are coming from people paying their fees. The other thing we haven't discussed either is how many people are going to be staying at hotels, restaurants. There'll be thousands of people throughout the year coming through. So from an economic development standpoint, this is probably the biggest thing that we can do short term to get our economy jump started. There's a lot of other components that we're working on right now, but this is the biggest hit so far. This money is going to be tremendous to get this city jump started. So anyway, thank you very much for considering it, and there's going to be a lot more to come, so it's going to get very exciting very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from the council? Seeing none, I accept a motion for approval of item 6.
So moved.
Second.
And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, can we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, one and all. Look forward to good things. No, we're doing real well. We'll just keep cranking. Next one will be public hearing, item number 8, consideration of a text amendment, Planning Division file number TA 12-03 to the City of Lompoc Municipal Code sections noted below. And Lucille? Lucille, I'm going to just get one thing in here ahead of time, so everybody, because people have asked me this question. So there are sections in here that are highlighted, and those are the sections that are new text. And there are a great number of strikeouts. The strikeouts were simply the conversion of the information that was in a line-listed format into a grid format. So when you look at these grids, they contain all the items that were stricken out above and below, and the only changes to the ordinance are the ones that are highlighted. They were in green if you have one of the original copies, and they're shaded if you have the current copy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an opportunity for the City Council to conduct a public hearing to consider a text amendment to municipal code sections that generally cover our residential zoning districts. And the anticipation is the council will provide initial consideration and direction to the staff on the proposed changes as they are listed and attached to the staff report. The staff will then return with professional input on the proposed changes to the May 29th City Council meeting. I would like to note that we did receive supplemental information, an email from Ms. Carol Benham that was distributed to the council and was made available to the public and posted on the website. And that really concludes my staff report, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions at this time? Thank you. I think I'd like to start out with just opening this up for public comment, and then we'll come back and we'll have some discussion on it. Is there anyone in the public that's here to discuss this item, wants to comment on it? Come on down.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council and fellow citizens of Lompoc. My name is Robert Schmidtke. I'm a resident and I own a small apartment complex here in Lompoc. Actually, it's presently designated R3. Recently, and since this all began, I had occasion to find out that. Yes.
Let me tell you that we're not going to talk about that issue tonight. You're welcome to go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Yes.
But that's not on tonight's list. It's a little ways up in the future.
High density.
It is, but you're talking about the ones where the general plan map is one thing and the zoning map's the other. And that's another meeting coming up. This is an amendment of these particular zoning ordinances.
You know what? I haven't seen the amendment. It's not available.
If you chase out to the lobby, I passed them out a couple meetings ago, but if you run out to the lobby, there's one out there, and I'll give you another bite at the apple.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Everybody's confused. Okay, so let me start over. What we are here this evening to do is to review the first draft that I provided to the council several weeks ago of proposed changes to the R1, R2, and R3 zones. These changes involve two things. Number one, the reformatting of the ordinance into the format that we are using throughout this process, which is to take material from a line listed basis and put it into a grid so it's a little easier to understand. Within that grid, there are 3 changes that are being discussed, or 4 changes, I'm sorry, and that are highlighted. The first one has to do with, in the R1 zone, a correction that deals with care of non-related as defined in section 17008.0, which is home care of someone that's not related to you, and a phrase to do with parks and playgrounds, and then a phrase dealing with family daycare homes as defined in Health and Safety Code section 1596.70. And what that basically means that these will all become conditional uses. Okay, those are the changes in the R1 zone. In the R2 zone, or R3 zone, the proposed change is to change the building height from 3 stories to 2 stories. And then finally, the last item is the last page of the document, titled Residential Units Without Building Permits. I guess the only way I'm going to do this is to read the whole thing, because not everyone out there has it. This deals with certain properties in Lompoc where the city records, for various reasons, do not reflect that a building permit is in place, and when that particular property becomes vacant and the utilities are turned off, they can't be turned back on. And so this is kind of the long story of it. So the findings of fact: there are many residential units in Lompoc for which building permits cannot be located in city records. The city has maintained that it is the property owner's responsibility to provide that a building permit was issued for the unit. The city makes routine searches of its records for building permits before contacting property owners. One property owner that was contacted by the city and told that the second unit on her property was constructed without permit was able to provide the city a copy of a 1925 city building permit from her father's records. I, and I'm speaking of myself, was sent an order to cease business by the city for 321 North D Street. The city alleged that work had been done without permits. Fortunately, I was able to locate a 1965 building department sticker on an electrical panel from the work done by Comcast. 2. In the early years of the city, many residents, and particularly second units and garage conversions, were done with no permit, and enforcement was not required. 3. During World War II, many structures were converted to handle the needs of Camp Cook. The feelings in Lompoc was that it was a patriotic mandate to convert available buildings to help the troops and dependents. 4. Prior to 1997, a succession of building officials enforced building permit policy in very different ways. In some cases, friends were given a pass on the need for permits and conversions. Others were overlooked with a wink, and total enforcement was inconsistent. The date is significant because that's when we changed to a different computerized process. Number 5, today these properties have changed ownership one or more times, and the knowledge of when and why a structure came to be a residence has been lost. Additionally, city records stretched back to 1888 are less than complete. Number 6, the city currently begins a code enforcement process on these dwellings when the utilities have been turned off and there is a request to turn the utilities back on. Number 7, the code enforcement process is also inconsistent with some owners simply being required not to reoccupy the residence and others being required to remove plumbing, electrical, or even part of the structure. This code enforcement process is inconsistent from property to property and costs both staff and city attorney time. Number 8, These structures have been on the county tax rolls for many years as residences. Number 9, it is unreasonable to require property owners to provide building permits as proof that structures were legally constructed or converted, as the current owners did not build or convert the structures. The structures continue to be a point of conflict between property owners and the City of Lompoc. Number 10, the general plan speaks of a compact urban form, and eliminating these residential units is contrary to that objective, and older units also contribute to low and very low income units at a greater percentage than other units. Resolution. For all the reasons listed above, the residential zoning ordinance of the City of Lompoc are hereby residential zoning ordinances, plural, of the City of Lompoc are hereby amended to reflect that any residential structure in existence and appraised for property tax on January 1, 1998 shall be deemed a legal structure and be treated as though it were built with a permit. Such structures shall comply with the building code, excluding setbacks, in force on the year that the structure was first appraised by the County of Santa Barbara. There's the long story on that. Okay, so those are the big changes involved in this. Everybody got that now? All right, I see a lot of smiles. Okay, now let's go. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Martiner.
Is it public or back to the council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a lot of concerns with this document. You chose to go into the residential units without building permits first, and you went and read the whole thing. I guess we'll discuss that first. But I do have plenty of other issues in the previous 5 pages. But we'll go to the last page. To write a resolution where we will deem properties legal and say that they complied without having inspections, or are they going to be inspected? Are we going to require that the sheetrock gets pulled off so we can look at what the electrical wiring was? Because we assume, since these properties did not have a permit, did not have inspections, and if they did not have inspections, there might have been some safety liabilities, not intended, but there may be. So there is many consequences that will come along with that. One of the consequences is primarily that the city may open itself to some legality liabilities, although my legal counsel here is saying that that will need to be discussed later, and I'm sure we'll discuss it when the staff comes back. The second one is that if we deem certain properties legal, and we say they're legal even though they were never permitted, who is to say that today I would say, well, why should I need a permit? If you let those folks not have a permit and become legal, well, maybe I can be legal without requiring a permit. So I don't know how that inconsistency is going to be addressed by this resolution, but it's clearly a big inconsistency by setting the precedent that we allow certain properties to become legal without ever being permitted and undergone the inspection processes. Who is to say that if I want to build a house today, I will come down to City Hall and say, why are you requiring me to apply for a permit? Why don't you let me just build? So those are big concerns. I know that we have to go through this process, and the staff will have to come back, and then it's going to have to go to the Planning Commission. But it seems to me that there is just some major holes that I'll certainly will have a lot of issues to propose something like this, and I will be looking forward to the staff to provide me with a professional recommendation in how we can address some of these particular issues with some analysis of what can be done that is consistent with the permitting process and that it will protect the residents at large and not just the handful that is in this situation. So at the end of the day, we have to come up with a resolution that is going to protect the public at large, and at the same time, it will address this concern. I'm not saying that it needs to be ignored, by no question, but it needs to be addressed in such a manner, and it needs to be resolved in such a manner that it actually benefits the whole community, not just individuals. I just brought one point that is a blatant point that it will show inconsistencies in the city as to who has to be permitted and who doesn't have to be permitted. So that's for now, but I'd be very much welcoming some other comments in the previous 3 pages that you have not addressed.
You can go ahead on the other pages. I mean, we can take a look at all of them, then we can go to public comment.
Okay. So the idea here is to revise the, I would say, the code in many ways. And it's been changed in a format. Okay, it's going from A, B, C, D, F, G to this table. And this is what we see. Now, there is a lot of details. I think the staff is going to have to spend lots of hours in going through various details. I understand the intent of this. The intent is to simplify it. The intent is to make it easy. I agree. But I can give you one example where that is being totally undermined, and that's the example, for example, of home occupations. Home occupations in the present situation are, you can apply for a home business in your home, and you come to City Hall, and you pay about $120 to apply for a home office, and then you apply for a license, and you're done. I did it myself personally. I have an internet-based business. The best thing to do it is out of my home, and it cost me about $130. Very easy process. It was less than 3 days. Now the proposal here is to have home occupations to be conditionally permitted. That means that it has to go to the Planning Commission. That means that it's going to cost about $1,200.
And it goes to the zoning administrator. I'm sorry.
Well, conditionally permitted to me means going to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, read the next column to the right.
Okay, so now...
That wasn't the intent. The intent was...
But that's what's happening now. It is going to the... So what's the difference? There is no difference. The system is already providing a very streamlined system in which you come to City Hall, you go to the zoning administrator or whoever, and, an application. 2 days later, you get, a letter back saying you got it or you don't, and here is your fee. We have that in place.
That's the intent of this. If the wording leads you in a different direction, it wasn't the intent.
Okay, so there is no change, but you do have it with your green marked.
I did because in the current zoning, the zoning administrator isn't spelled out in the current ordinance because it didn't exist when the current ordinance was written, and this is my effort to highlight the fact that, that this is slightly different from the current version.
What's the difference if you're telling me that there is no difference? I'm saying the system already have it in place, and you're saying, well, but it's slightly different, and
Okay,
that's why I highlighted it. So if I'm highlighting it, it's because I'm changing it, and I'm saying, but what are you changing? And you're telling me I'm not changing anything. So I'm a little confused, and this is only one example.
Okay, let's do one at a time. Lucille, could you explain, since I went down this road because I thought I was doing what you guys wanted, could you explain what I'm doing wrong here?
The home use permit, as Councilmember Martiner explained, is currently permitted in the residential zones with a home use permit. And we had received direction a few years ago to simplify the process. We have done that, and it's listed in another section of the code under home use permit, where a person comes in and applies. Within 72 hours, the permit is actually granted, and they obtain their business tax statement, and that is just a completed process. And that is why it's listed as a permitted use in the zone.
Okay, so it was not my intent to change that, and if you hereby have literary license to do what it is that needs to be done.
Thank you.
So take it out of the green mark, and make it clear. So the bottom line is rather confusing. And in the spirit of going through the details, because I happen to jump into the home occupations because I happen to have a personal experience on the process, which maybe the other council members don't. We certainly, or maybe you may have some other, personal experience on the rest homes for the elderly code process in the city, so you may catch on it. But what I'm trying to say here is that this is very technical. And it is not the place here to be saying this is what we got to do. The place belongs very much under the technical guidance of the Planning Commission and the staff. They are the technical people that will have to cross teeth and cross hairs in all of this. And for us to just say, oh, well, all of this looks good and it sounds good, go for it, is, I think, a little naive and a little, superficial, because the consequences of what the changes that are going to be made here are going to be big for the city. And the consequences need to be looked at carefully. And I think it is the technical staff and the Planning Commission's expertise to look at those details carefully. And, I won't belabor the point, but I think it really needs to go to the Planning Department, go to the Planning Commission, and have a serious look at what is done today, what is being proposed here, and what are the pros and cons with the potential consequences, and what would be the impact. None of it which is here. Okay? There is no impact, there is no pros and cons, let's just do this, okay? And certainly it's not a document that, you can base any decisions or provide any policy-making guidelines unless you really have a lot more information on what's going to happen here when we do this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Just so everybody's on track, our goal here is to provide the staff in a general sense with some guidance with regard to these issues, and then they will be coming back to us with that information that you're talking about, Councilmember Martiner. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ms. Breeze, if you could clarify, my apologies, I wasn't sure if I understood you correctly. We're essentially changing home occupations to no longer need a home use permit, but will simply go through the minor use permit process to streamline it.
No, the home use permit is a specific permit that is issued by the Planning Division.
So not only are we saying home occupations need to get the home use permit, but now we're saying they need the minor use permit in addition.
No, that is not. I believe that the intent of the mayor is that it be retained as a permitted use with a home use permit, and it would not be in the category of the zoning administrator.
Okay, so just to be clear, on the table 17.020, that home occupations listed under conditionally permitted under R1 will now be under the permitted column.
That is where it currently is, and that's my understanding, that it would be returned to that column.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you. So I guess the general struggle that I'm having here is not being an urban planner. So I'm trying, I did as much research as I could, and I tried to prepare myself as best as I could for this discussion. So I just want to go piece by piece here. The first page presented by Mayor Lynn, the inconsistent residential parcels. Although I understand the idea of his resolution, I just wanted to put out there that my recommendation is that we go in the manner that city staff and the Planning Commission had previously suggested, and that's actually going parcel by parcel. So I would like to go into a little bit more in depth instead of just having a blanket resolution. That's not to say that that's actually what will end up happening, but I think that we need to take into consideration the history of each parcel and do it that way. So I would like to go with the original intention of city staff and the Planning Commission as previously recommended. In regards to residential units without building permits, under your resolution, I have two questions, Mayor Lynn. The statement here is, for all the reasons listed above, the residential zone ordinances of the City of Lompoc are hereby amended to reflect that any residential structure in existence and appraised for property tax on January 1st, 1998. Is that supposed to be on or before January 1st, 1998?
Correct, on or before.
On or before. And then I was just curious, what was the motivation behind that specific date?
In talking to the staff, the policies of the city and their application changed in late 1997 with the change of the management of the building department, and it was felt that after that date, not just by the staff but also talking to contractors and even some attorneys in the community, that prior to that date things were kind of hit and miss, and after that date the rules were followed more accurately. I was contacted this last week by an attorney representing a homeowner who bought a house with a second unit built by another attorney here in Lompoc in the late 60s, and the utilities were off, and when she went to have them turned back on, she was told, well, there was no building permit. And knowing that attorney as I did when he was alive, it's very unlikely that he built an entire building without a building permit. But on the other hand, it wouldn't be the first kind of odd thing that happened at various times. The other thing, I don't think we even know how many of these parcels there are because they keep turning up. We really don't know until something gets turned off that it can't be turned back on. And each of these is very time consuming and can, at some point can go all the way to court. There's one that's not too far away from that right now, from a structure that had been occupied since probably in the 20s, in the 30s for sure. So it's just a way to try to streamline this and quit having to run people through the ringer over it.
I definitely understand the need for a resolution. There is a clear issue that we have, and the community has brought forward in this regard. I'm not confident. Not that I'm not confident. I'm unsure what the best solution to that issue is. I know that there's been some discussion of the grandfather clause and what role that plays in this discussion. So I agree that this is something that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at. I'm very interested to see what city staff has recommended as well. So I think that they can take this as a recommendation, which I'm comfortable with, but I would like their analysis and additional recommendations as well, possibly looking into that grandfather clause.
Yes, absolutely.
So moving on to the R1 single-family residential district table that you have compiled, I'm a little bit concerned. When I looked through what was listed and permitted in the current text and then what was put in the table, I noticed that there was something missing. Crop and tree farming wasn't listed any longer. Also in conditionally permitted, private academic schools wasn't listed any longer. So those are edits that need to be made. I just want to make sure that staff goes through with a fine-tooth comb, that if we are changing the format, that nothing gets lost in the shuffle.
I think crop and tree farming got dropped out because the parcels are gone, but that's okay. I'd be happy to leave it in.
And then private academic schools under conditionally permitted as well. And then under development standards, I didn't see them, I may have missed it, but I didn't see signs and roof overhang listed in the table, but I did see them listed in the text. Or you just wanted to keep them in the text version and not actually put them in the table? Was that the intention?
Yeah, those stayed in the text version because they dealt across the entire range. That's why they weren't in the strikeouts.
Okay. And then again, in the R2 medium density residential district, home occupations is again listed under conditionally permitted. However, it's not highlighted in this case, and I just want to confirm that that will then be moved over to permitted as previously discussed for R1.
It's already allowed. It's
What?
already allowed.
Correct. In the table, it's listed under conditionally permitted. So as discussed with R1, that would then be needed to be moved over to permitted as well and not left under conditionally permitted. R3 would be the same concern. Home occupations is again listed under conditionally permitted.
I thought that one was. Lucille, are those conditionally permitted or permitted now?
They are permitted.
Okay. Yes, you are correct.
So all of those, just to be sure. So again, requesting that staff go through this with a fine-tooth comb and be sure that nothing gets lost in the shuffle. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions you already answered. We don't know how many structures we're talking about. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. I share Council Member Martiner's concern about the safety, and I'm assuming there will be some sort of a safety inspection on some of these structures?
Well, the reason I phrased it that way was that they had to be compliant with the codes at the time that the structure was ended up on the county tax roll. So, for instance, if a structure was on the county tax roll from 1929, then it would have to be compliant with the 1929 building code, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be compliant with a 2012 building code.
Correct, but how do we validate that? Yeah.
That would be a question for staff.
Okay, and that's my next point is, I think when I read this, I thought the intent of this, and I believe the intent of this, is to have this discussion we're having right now. Then we're going to turn it back over to staff, and this line, it says the staff will return with the initial professional input on the proposed changes. So everything we're talking about right now, we're not approving any of these changes right now. We're turning it back over to staff. I think we're having some good discussion. We're giving staff some ideas where we stand, and I believe the safety is some concern of this, and maybe they'll come back with some recommendations. Now, after staff, will this go then to the Planning Commission?
After staff, it comes back to us for review and recommendation. Then from us, it goes to the Planning Commission, goes through their process. So again, as it was with the other ones, our goal here is to, in a general sense, give the Planning Commission an idea what we want to see done so that we get it in one round. We're not bouncing things around.
And it's going to be whittled down, meted out several times before, you know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take it that this January 1st, 98 also pretty much links with this item number 4 up here. It would make sense to me. The other thing that I wanted to bring up here was we're worried about all these units and are they permitted and all of this. Well, you know, the city assigns an address to everything in town, where you get your mail. You don't make up your own address. So somewhere the proof in the pudding here is the fact that either A, you made up an address, or you were assigned one, which shows that you were run through the process somehow. So, I mean, I think that the cutoff date there is a very sufficient thing. I mean, you know, we're flailing around with this document, but it's not going to misplanning or the professionals or staff. I think that the input here that we're putting in is what we're trying to forward out to the professionals.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. Councilmember Starbuck, I'm a little bit confused with your statement, only because I know with very early properties that would definitely be the case. But say a property in the early 90s where there was already an address assigned to a property owner, maybe with a pre-existing building who had an additional building add-on but didn't receive a permit, that's not necessarily proof that there was a building permit. Yeah. That's the confusion that I'm having.
No, absolutely, that's not proof. But all of a sudden, we have residents that are building houses and giving themselves a 109.5 address. I mean, there's flags out there. You know, I mean, we got to draw the line. This is where it's got to be. And I don't know if you want to go to 1925 and we go through the same process again, or we just say, let's make it January 1st, 98, on or before. And the people that are going to be liable for it are going to be the property owners that did this. If it was an illegal thing and the place burns, then it's their liability. It doesn't come back to the city on that.
That is true. We are not liable. You know, there's one issue we haven't discussed, and I'd like to come around to that just to get everyone's opinion, and that has to do with the question of 2-story or 3-story with regard to the R3 zone. And this is something I put in here after some comments from the neighbors next to the home base on G Street. And And I never really thought about it, but I went over there and parked, and I walked next to each neighbor, and I walked across the street, and I went around behind the alley, and it just seemed to me that a 3-story apartment building was out of place compared to the other buildings in town. Then I got to looking around and realized that that was the only one there is, and I don't want to tear it down, but I think, you know, in terms of something that blends in with what we currently have, 2 stories is adequate. And other than that project, which received, how would I say it, special consideration because of what it was going to be used for, so the parking was reduced and the density was increased, that's probably the reason it was able to build to 3 stories. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Not being aware of any planning laws, Ms. Breeze, is there any anything that says that an R3 can be limited to 2 stories? Are we going beyond the law here? Is that something that's within the jurisdiction of the city?
It's within the jurisdiction of the city.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has a thought about that? Is 2 stories perceived to be reasonable, or Councilmember Lingle?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable, but I'm glad you brought it up. I had it marked and I forgot. You're saying the one project there on G Street is the only 3-story right now, so we're not going to be excluding someone that already has a 3-story?
Well, and if it exists, this doesn't affect them. This would just be for someone who's going to build something. This doesn't affect an existing building.
What was after 1998?
No, this one has nothing.
Okay.
One has nothing to do with the other. Thank you for the lighter moment. Councilmember Martner.
Again, we're talking about high density, and, you know, and this, I look at it from the context of the general plan update, and that's, you know, it really should be put in there, and the discussion should go in there. One of the ideas is you have a high density area. You want to make it as high density as possible, so you do infill as opposed to spreading out. I mean, I think that concept is being discussed, and depends on what side you are on. You know, you'll be discussing it forever. But it needs to be discussed in that context, not just like 2 stories sounds good because there is only one 3-story building in the town. I think it needs to be discussed in the context of what the city wants to be. Does the city wants to grow up or sideways? Does it want to go into an urban sprawl, or does it want to have areas of high density within the town to do infill? That's really where the discussion lies, as opposed to whether it's a 2-story or a 3-story. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that limiting it to 2 stories goes against the argument of compact urban form that you suggested in your write-up. However, I may be more open to having certain areas allowed for 2 stories and certain for 3 stories, because there may be appropriate locations in our community where that would be more appropriate than others. But I'm also really interested to hear what the public has to say at this point. Thank you.
Okay, realize that in our prior discussion, we agreed to 3 stories within all of the commercial zones by comparison. So there are areas where a 3-story would be appropriate. It's just that, I mean, this particular one is backed up to a commercial zone, but for instance, would you want a 3-story building in the, would be a good example, 400 block of North 3rd Street, or 500 block of North 3rd Street, where you have predominantly 2-story apartment buildings, and across the street you have 1-story residences, and then you put a 3-story building up in the middle of it. It just didn't seem, from a scale standpoint, and particularly after comments from 2 of the neighbors around that building, frankly, if I lived there, I'd sell my house and move. So that was it. Councilmember Starbuck.
The only thing that I'd like to say about the 3-story, why I think that we may want to consider possibly, is on some of the smaller lots that we have here with the 25-foot frontages and all, that it may be a feasible thing for a developer later down the road that he may want to use the whole bottom as nothing more than a parking to meet the requirements for parking for a unit, which would put him into a position where the 2nd story would be the first livable unit and then the one above it. And so, I mean, you know, looking into that for the compact urban design, that's the only thing that I would say that would, I would kind of want to lean that way on the 3-story.
Okay, well, that's 3, so we'll just mark that out and we'll stay at 3. Any other discussion before we go for some public discussion? Seeing none, Who's first? Terry? Terry, before you have this discussion, now that you're a planning commission member, would you take just a moment and talk with the city attorney about what you should and should not say? I'm concerned that this might change what you would be able to say.
I understand where the mayor is going, I think, is the concern of planning commissioners or any decision-making member can't express themselves in such a way that someone's due process right may be violated if they have an item come before the planning commission. I don't have any concern about this matter or Mr. Hammond's commenting on this matter with regard to that due process issue.
Perfect. Sorry, just keeping you out of trouble.
Terry Hammonds, Lompoc. I want to address this idea about paying property tax and the legalizing, permitting of a structure. It doesn't fly. You may think that it makes sense that somebody was being assessed for a structure on a lot, but the assessor doesn't really know whether that parcel, that structure was legal or not. He doesn't care, or she doesn't care. The assessor does not care. If they see an improvement to a lot, they're going to assess it. There's also something that the California Appellate Court decided in 1978, and Mr. Pannoni can address this issue. I don't know how this may affect, but owners cannot collect payment rent from an unpermitted illegal structure, and it was decided in the case of Grusin versus Henry. Now, it would seem to me that what you are attempting to do would be sidestepping that very court ruling in some way, saying, well, whether they were illegal before, now they're legal. And you really don't know that. You really have no idea what's inside those structures. And I think there is a liability issue for the city if you permit something and you really don't know what it is. Now, as an owner of property, past and now, it's on me. It's not on the city. If I come down to the city and I get a permit, then that's the way it should be. If I don't get a permit, then you should not take care of me. Your job is not to take care of me. I'm my own person. I'm responsible for what I do. So this is not a way to go. This is not a way to go. You need to look at what's good for the entire community. If people build unpermitted, illegal structures, let them deal with that. That's the way to go. And there's no other way around it. I mean, we're a country of law. We were founded on laws. Why don't we follow the law? We're just going to go around and change everything because we don't believe, oh, well, actually, there's something very interesting about this. The accusation was made that things were done with a wink. What are you doing? Are you winking now? Yeah, I think you are. I think you're winking, and that's not right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And who's next?
For my bite at the apple.
Absolutely. Got to say your name again.
My name is Robert Schmidtke. I'm a resident of Lompoc. I have been for almost 6 years now, almost 7, no, 6. At any rate, I like it. I think it's a good idea. When I was looking for properties here and checking for building permits, I found that they were wanting in the city, the permit thing. I've run across ones where they were once 2 units with a garage and another outbuilding, on the county tax rolls, and then you go to the unit and you look at it and you see they've torn the garage down. They once converted one of the units into a 3-car garage, and then they converted it back to 2 rental units. God knows when. I see any number in this city of converted garages that are used as an extra bedroom for the family. I see very few of those as rentals, but the man is right about that rental law in the state. That was done to protect people from predatory landlords who would just convert a 1-car garage and fit 5 people in it. That was brought out in L.A. mostly, where I owned a number of rentals, but mine were all clean. The city had an inspection course there, and they were amazed. They never wrote a correction to me. Not in 10 years of owning rental properties in the city of Los Angeles. I never got a correction from the inspectors. But there are things that have gone on in the past, and they're covered here, this wink and the nod thing, and a lot of really bad record keeping, because it just happened. Can't blame people. I mean, we got to start at some point. The simplification you're doing within this is brilliant. Actually, the city is not responsible for this. I like the part, if somebody had one of these that's now deemed, oh, we bless you, you're legal, and they wanted to do a remodel, I'm sorry, you're not going to extend the knob and tube into the remodel, because that will require permits, and we're going to make you bring that up to code. I've worked on any number of old structures in Los Angeles, Hawthorne, Redondo Beach, other places, and found that, oh, well, you're not going to put fuses back in there. No, you're going to be required to replace this with a breaker panel, and you're going to have to pull permits for that. Now you're going to have to ground it, and you have to bring things up to code when you make those changes. Every time. Every time. The limitations on that were how many square feet are you adding, etc. As far as a 3rd story in an R3 area, I've seen very little of that except around very, very high value land where they're desperately trying to increase density, and I've seen the height limits go to 36 feet in residential areas. But it all went to 36 feet because they tore down all the little single-family dwellings and sold these three-story monstrosities for $2 million so they could see the beach. It looks bad, and a lot of them have gone to repo. It's not a good plan, that. But you can raise the height limit if you want to put 3-story buildings, and they look kind of silly in a residential area, in my opinion. Right now, you've got a workable plan right here. Right here. This is a good workable plan. You have really simplified this. I got to borrow this copy and read it real quick. And I commend the consul, or whoever wrote this, on doing a good job. Yeah, it may need some tweaking here or there, but the thought of going back, if you want to do that, I'll inspect it. I'll go through every dwelling unit here, and you'll have people in open revolt if you make them bring stuff that was built prior to them buying it many years, and saying, oh, I'm sorry, you've got to put, I want a garage door there, and I tear that lawn out, let's have some driveway here. You can't do it to your citizens. The government is intrusive enough. We now have a lead law that was passed through caveat. You can't really open a wall in your house if it was built prior to 1974, I believe. 78, without getting some sort of a permit. This is ridiculous. If you hold up a sign in front of the President of the United States while he's talking, a protest sign, and he has security with him, you've just committed a felony. So much for the First Amendment.
Thanks,
It's
Robert.
becoming very difficult. Thank you very much.
And who's next?
Susan Gallagher, Lompoc resident. I'd like to commend the council, what they're thinking of doing tonight with the rezoning, but the code enforcement stuff. I have a property on the south side built in 1934. 1957, the garage was converted. And no final on it, no records on it. Then there's another property on South F Street that somewhere in 83 was permitted to build 4 condos on it. 2-story and a residential. And then when you address about the insurance or about the electrical, when you go to, I just sold a house on the south side, had fuses. For that person now to get insurance on her new home within a certain amount of time, that has to be replaced or it will not be insured. End of discussion. So that the insurance part will help address that kind of stuff. So I commend you guys for what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on down.
Hello, Debbie McComb, resident and general contractor. On the basis of what you're trying to do for the older residents, as a contractor, currently we are required when we finish building something to give the owner the permit. In previous times, a lot of times they didn't. Your residents that have a home that had some changes made to it at that time may or may not be in the records here in the city or in the county. I've found numerous times where you go through and you look through the old records, it says that they started the process, it never got finalized, it never got signed off, it's on the tax rolls. If it's a case where the contractor did not give the owner the permit, it's lost, it's gone, nobody has a record of it. If it's been typically on the tax roll, somebody knew about it. It wasn't bootlegged in, and so I like the consideration that you're giving for that because it does cause a lot of problems for owners who have purchased properties and who have had these buildings built legally, but they just don't have the records.
Thank you. Next. Last chance. Going once, going twice. Gone. Okay, come on back to council. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. In regards to residential units without building permits, what my interpretation is that the council is trying to do is attempt to ensure that all legally permitted buildings are allowed to operate as so. So those that are illegal or non-permitted, I don't think that that's our concern here this evening. So what I would task, again, as I mentioned previously, is task staff with looking into is a solution to that issue. And again, you know, I think we should take into consideration the question of the county assessor. If that does, I think that was a good question that was brought forth in regards to, do they look at values or do they really look at the legality of it? You know, what dates did these things begin to occur? Is 98 a sufficient date? I'm not sure, as well as the grandfather clause. So I would task staff with looking into that to, again, attempt to ensure that all legally permitted buildings are allowed to operate as such within our city. Thank you.
And I think I would go just a little further by saying the issue of legally permitted, the further back in time you get, the muddier the water gets. When you get back probably before in my case, in 1964, I've got the sticker in the building that says there was a permit, it was inspected and approved, and yet the city has no record of it. And so the further back you get, the worse it gets. And I don't know if January 1st, 1998 is the perfect date, but based on a lot of conversation with a lot of people, that was the date that seemed to hold the point for being most truthful going forward. Are there any other comments on this now before we give it to the professional staff for review and return to us? Okay. Lucille, do you have any questions or are you clear?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back with item 9. Okay. Number 9, nuisance code enforcement and administrative citation tools. Senior Code Enforcement Officer Steve Boggs.
Honorable Mayor and members of the council, good evening. I'm Steve Boggs, Senior Code Enforcement Officer for the City of Lompoc. At the February 21st, 2012 Lompoc City Council meeting, staff presented council with administrative citation tools as a method utilized by surrounding communities to obtain compliance with adopted city codes and ordinances in instances where voluntary compliance was not achieved. Ordinance 1584 was prepared by the City Attorney's Office and includes procedure for serving the administrative citation upon the responsible person, the administrative fine amounts with payment instruction, and the appeal process. A letter signed by Mayor Lynn was presented to be included with initial correspondence relating to violations he observed on private properties in our community. Council instructed that edits be made to the initial correspondence letter from Mayor Lynn, specifically removal of the sentence which states, if you are unable to correct the nuisance because of health or financial issues, please contact me for assistance. This letter has been attached to this evening's staff report as attachment number 2. As an informational component to assist our residents in identifying nuisance conditions on their property, a letter has been prepared along with the verbatim text of Lompoc Municipal Code section 17.140.010, which is proposed to be included in utility bill mailings and is included as attachment 3. As we continue towards our common goal in efforts to improve the quality of life for our residents, remove blight, and maintain property values, it is respectfully requested Council approve and introduce ordinance number 1584 in conjunction with the current complaint-based program. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Steve at this time? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. In regards to code enforcement, we've had multiple discussions about the way in which we will follow policy and how we want to establish the programs themselves. I'm curious if staff will be coming back with a more programmatic side of code enforcement. I know that one was passed out by Mayor Lynn, and we also went over some of the previous programs that were suggested by the city. Or is this really going to be the entirety of code enforcement updates at this point?
We would be proceeding as guided by council.
I think City Administrator, is it the intent that what's before us is the whole program at this point in time?
Mayor and Council, with the introduction of the ordinance and then the adoption, you will have in place the program for the provisions of the ordinance. If you would like to have periodic updates on the effectiveness of the program, that can be done at your desire.
So herein lies my concern. I think that this is a good start. There are certain things I agree with and disagree with, but I personally feel that we need to do more to educate the public. So I was researching quite a few code enforcement programs within multiple cities, and there was this really interesting city that listed, education, cooperation, enforcement. So it was really, a three-pronged strategy to deal with code enforcement. And I feel like we need to make sure that we're doing a balance of each: education, trying to get that cooperation, and then if not, going to that last step of enforcement. I don't want us to focus entirely on enforcement without those other two focuses. So for example, on the education side, there were certain things like community plans for neighborhoods. There was a citizen inspector program where there would be a training of citizens in these things. For cooperation, there's something, a resource guide for violators, for example, that may include phone numbers for folks who could assist them, either if it's paid or unpaid. So those kinds of things. I feel like I don't want us to cut ourselves off at the knees here. I want us to continue this and look into more additional low cost, of course, solutions to dealing with code enforcement. So I'm all for that, and I hope council would be willing to allow Mr. Boggs to continue with some additional efforts there. The other concern I had was in regards to the letter, Mayor Lynn. the attachment 2 as presented. Two minor grammatical comments. The first paragraph has the word community 3 times. So if we could somehow edit that, appearance of our neighborhoods possibly instead of the word community. And then in the third paragraph, after the word attention, there's a comma that I do not believe should be there, because then it reads disjunctively.
Referred to the grammar police.
And then lastly, in attachment 3, second paragraph, it says the code enforcement program goal is to help resolve problems while dealing with these violations. Again, I want to take that a step further, and maybe the goal is to do that, but also to provide enforcement of these rules and regulations in a responsible, in a fair, courteous, and impartial manner. So I'm more than willing to get with Mr. Boggs and add some of these things if if council is comfortable. I just want to be sure, that we're presenting code enforcement not just on the enforcement side, but that we're including that cooperation and education component as well. Thank you.
I agree with you completely, and to your end, as we discussed earlier with regard to the last sentence in attachment 2, if you have any questions or would like help in resolving this matter, please contact, etc. So rather than to discuss solutions, help in resolving is the wording that would make me feel a little better, because our goal is to help folks. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, and with regard to Councilmember Costa's catches, the other 2 things in the letter, anybody have a problem with the staff wordsmithing that? Okay, and then with regard to the suggestions on attachment 3, everybody okay with that? Okay, just to make it slightly more complicated, it also, I'll give one to Joe. And if you want to pass these down, then there's some for the audience. After some thinking and driving around lately, looking at the number of houses that we have that are in some form of foreclosure, I created another letter which would deal specifically with foreclosure properties to deal with the financial institution. So this would be for a property where the property is transitioned to the financial institution, because the other letter doesn't really work very well for that. And the difference in this letter is perhaps it's slightly more forceful, but it also has an attachment which is a list of licensed businesses in Lompoc that provide services. So if you have a contractor, and this came about because several out-of-town property owners, when I had contacted them prior to beginning this process, going, hey, your property's in not very good shape, and those were both commercial properties, said, well, we don't really know anybody in Lompoc. Could you recommend somebody? And then I thought of Joe and the slippery slope, and so I went to the city clerk and had her run a list of gardeners and handymen who were licensed to transact business in the city, and I sent it to them, and each one of them used somebody and fixed their property and thanked me. So the solution worked in the past. If you guys would take a quick look at that letter and see if you have any thoughts on that.
Mayor Lynn?
Costa.
Thank you. This would be for not only financial institutions, but also could be for commercial property owners as well? Could be utilized for both?
It's really directed at financial institutions because they have kind of a different approach to it. I guess, the staff could use it wherever they felt that it was appropriate. It's just one more tool in the bag.
Right. Just reading this, it seems more appropriate for commercial properties than possibly that first letter.
Yeah.
So.
Just a tool in the bag, and obviously they're able to use it in however they see fit. Okay, with regard to the ordinance itself, 1584 sub 12, be looking for council's comments on that. And before we go too much further, City Attorney, could you comment on say the effectiveness of this approach? I know you've said something about it in the past, but just so we're up to stuff today with regard to other cities you have experience in, and how helpful this tool is or is not.
My experience has been that communities that have the administrative citation ability do seem to get more cooperation from the residents to have their properties maintained better, even without the need to issue the citations. It's just a concept of people understanding that there's something else that may happen. And I think Mr. Boggs, when he did his research, he found the same conclusion.
That's correct.
And would you say overall that this probably reduces the need for city attorney letters and all of those things that are down at the end of the road to some extent?
I think it makes compliance happen more quickly.
Thank you. Any discussion about the ordinance itself? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. I just wanted to re-express what I have at previous meetings, and my hope is that we can take this agenda item in multiple votes, because I will not be supporting any administrative citation. I think forcing somebody into compliance through threat of a financial burden is not the way to go in our community, so I will not be supporting the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll come to that issue a little further down the road. Is there anything else anyone wants to say now, or should we have public comment? Okay, we'll open this to public comment. Who would like to talk to us about this?
Terry Hammonds, Lompoc. Let's just put it, there's 10 people on a block, and for some reason somebody wants to cement in their entire front lawn. They want to park vehicles that are inoperable, or store them actually in their front area. They don't want to paint their house. They don't want to cooperate. Can you imagine what the value of your house is going to be? It all comes to the idea that this community is trying to do the best it can to improve. We've been down this road of decline, and now we're trying to make the city appear that we are going to do something about our economics. Now, to say that it's hard on somebody about a fine or a citation, well, really, you don't want to do that immediately. And I can understand why you would think it's hard, but it's not really. Sometimes people need a little nudge to move along. And I think that in those communities where you see citations, the citation process, and homeowner associations already have it. So let's get right up to the 21st century. We have homeowner associations that have existed in this community for many, many years, and they already have that citation process. They call them fines. And they've worked matter of fact, they work very well, because people have a right to represent themselves at these violation hearings. They have a right to explain what may have caused them to have a problem. And you don't have to always go right to the citation. I mean, there's ways to work with somebody to try to get their property improved. But just to take a position, I'm not going to do that, does not help us. Does not help us. I don't know how much longer I have to live on this planet, but I would like to see this community turn around. I would like to see us improve a lot before I go away. And I know we can, because when I came here, this was a very well-maintained community. I like this city. I like it a lot. I stayed here for over half of my life. So to see a position where people say, well, that's just too hard, is not right. Because we all live here and we all need to cooperate. Or let's just eat each other and then that'll be the end of it. You know? But thank you.
Well, hopefully we'll avoid that alternative. Anyone else like to speak to us on this subject? Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, back to council. Just some I think when we started down this road, it may not have been exactly what I wanted to do. It wasn't on my list of the 100 top things in Lompoc to do, but the subject kept coming back, and Terry and I have had a lot of conversations about it. And it was obviously where something needed to be done, but I'm kind of, I guess, with Terry in that regard too, that you want to create a mechanism where people want to comply, and I think the letter is my tool to them to go, hey, come on, get in the game, help us out here, let's work together. And I think truly that'll obtain a great deal of compliance. I've been amazed over the year and a half what the mayor asking does in so many circumstances, and that's a good thing. And then the first fine in this is $25, which is the go to jail fine from Monopoly, I think. And I think the idea with that is that you have to have a line in the sand where someone has a penalty that they're looking at and or has to pay if they don't do something. But to Councilmember Costa's point when we discussed this before is I don't think it needs to be a large amount. So we're not trying to look like we're making money, but we're trying to draw that line in the sand and go, okay, come on, get with the program. And then after that, it gets kind of expensive if you continue to ignore it. And there are scoffers out in the world. I recall an apartment building about 15 years ago where we ultimately, through city action, closed the building because the guy wouldn't fix anything. And, you know, those are, I'm sure that's going to happen again one day. But I think the vast majority of people will get on board. I think this provides Steve with a little tool. And I think the other thing to note is that for as long as Steve is with us, his approach has been to work with people and to resolve issues. And I've received a lot of positive comments with regard to that. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to have a little discussion, Councilmember Costa, as to your opposition. Is it because some people just may not be able to afford the fine? Is that what your opposition is? What's your problem with the fine process?
Let me read the proposed ordinance language. In addition to or in place of any other remedy which is allowed by law, whether administrative, criminal, civil, or equitable, there is hereby established an administrative penalty that may be imposed in connection with any violation of any provision, restriction, or requirement of this code, any ordinance of the city, any rule or regulation promulgated pursuant thereunto, or any condition of any permit issued pursuant to this code. So my concern is that this is a blank check. Okay, I believe that our code enforcement officer, as he sits, will use this in the right manner. We are setting policy for the future. There is nothing to say who will be sitting in that seat in the future. In addition, I think that this could create the potential to have additional problems within neighborhoods. What you can do now is not only can I make a complaint on my neighbor, but if I make enough complaints, I can then make him pay a citation for what I'm complaining about. Therefore, pinning neighbor against neighbor as a possibility. I think that we have not fulfilled our duty to attempt to do this through education and cooperation, and I think that we are jumping to enforcement. That is my concern. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. The education process, I believe the letter that will be going out is a step in education, letting the individual know that there is a violation of our code. But Mr. Hammond's talked about it. If we drive through this community, and we've got a list on our agenda tonight of properties that are now being taken to the step where the fire department is describing it as actually a hazard condition. There's a property that I met with the owner, or the next door neighbor, on South C Street. It's on one of the properties today, where this person just does not take care of their property. Right now, and a year ago we dealt with this property. The city went in and paid, I believe it was in the neighborhood of several $1,000s, $7,000 to clean up this property for the individual after repeated letters, complaints, warnings. Nothing got this person to do it. Now, this person, the $500 fine, he probably won't pay that anyway. I don't know what we're going to do with that. That's a possibility. And that's an issue maybe we can discuss. What if the person doesn't pay it? I don't know, would we assess it to their taxes like we did the $7,000? But I believe there must be some penalty if we've continually asked the person to clean up their property, address the violation. Otherwise, they're just not going to do it. Now, there's one thing we may want to discuss. I thought your concern was that some people just may not be able to afford it. And I believe there will be some people in the community that maybe the $25 is a lot of money to them. What I'd like us to consider, if that is an issue, is so that we're not looked at as we're just doing this to fatten our coffers, is that these fines be put into an account that when we find someone with a violation and this individual truly cannot afford to have a property repaired or maybe fix their fence, they prove to us that they are unable to pay it, and maybe out of this fund where we've been collecting the $25 here, $25 there, $100 here, we can help that citizen that truly cannot afford it address that code. I'd like us to consider something like that, so it's not that the city is just doing this to make some money. Thank you.
City Attorney, would you discuss that concept, please?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think the ordinance as it's set out, if we look at Section 136070, provides a vehicle for someone who is in the situation that Councilmember Lingle was discussing, having a discussion with the city administrator, and the city administrator would have authority to waive that fine if that kind of information was given. So I think there's a structure already there to resolve that issue.
It's not necessarily the fine that I'm concerned about. What if that individual, let's take an example, a single mother raising 5 kids, having trouble even putting shoes and bread on the table, yet she has a violation of a garage door that's hanging out from one hinge. She physically or simply cannot afford to have that repaired. The fine, yes, we can waive the fine, but a repairing of the door, I'd like to be able to have the fines that are paid put into a fund that we can assist that resident to repair that garage door. So using those fines that we collect for the person that truly cannot afford that. That was my issues.
That's within the council's discretion to add an item to the budget that indicates where the money is, any fines that are collected, what that money is going to be used for. You may want to, one of the things you may need to think about carefully, though, is if you spend public money to do a private improvement, it could cause prevailing wages to then apply, and it could cause the cost of that improvement to unnecessarily go up.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're trying to go to the ends of the spectrum here. Almost the 4 years that I've been here, there's been 2 cases of code violations that this council, or perhaps half of the council, or maybe the whole council, have gone through. One was on A Street, and the other one is on South C. We have put liens on the properties. We had to repair fences. And why? Because neighbors talked about rotten fruit with rats coming all over the place. I mean, it was a public nuisance, no questions about it. The city acted on it. It acted on it because of many complaints. Now, that's only 2 examples since I've been up here. I think there is multiple situations like this in the city that perhaps the neighbors are not choosing to complain. This ordinance, I don't think this ordinance addressed those issues, or maybe is supposed to address those issues. That's one end. The other end is what Councilmember Costa and Councilmember Lingle are talking about, that there is perhaps a homeowner that may not qualify or may not have the monies to repair this, and then Councilmember Lingle is providing, proposing that maybe the city should go in the business to provide this service. I certainly don't want to go there because there is lots of things that we constantly get told, we don't want the government to get into it. We don't want the government to do this or that. It is the property owner's responsibility. If we're going to provide a service to help homeowners to deal with their code compliance issues, we may want to provide other services like homeless shelters, like all kinds of things that we always go into that maybe yes, maybe no. So look at the whole picture. What are we talking about here? Councilmember Costa thinks that as I understand what her concern is that the ordinance will lead itself to abuse by an administrator because it's too general. Is that?
That's part of my argument, that there's potential for that, yes.
So if there is a potential from a government abuse of providing a fine on some code, we need to correct that. Could Councilmember Costa provide an idea of how can we correct this potential abuse by the government?
My suggestion would be not having an administrative citation. As said by the city attorney, really what you're doing with an administrative citation is increasing the speed and gaining compliance. So when we're talking about these extreme cases, you said it yourself, this is not going to help in those cases. We have other avenues that we will follow to try to deal with those cases. So what we're dealing with here is increasing the speed and gaining compliance. I'm just trying to keep that in the back of my head. For me, that is not enough of a priority to implement an administrative citation that is very general in the sense that we are giving the power completely to one individual or one department to cite folks. So for me, it's not something that I'm comfortable with.
So thank you for the clarification. I think it kind of brings the point out to where the problem is. I happen to agree that a citation will help us achieve compliance faster. I also happen to agree that it's that little notch that will push people to, okay, I will take care of it. So in my case, I think it will help. As far as the abuse part, the potential perceived abused, I think there is an appeal process in place in the ordinance where if somebody is being pointed out, as the mayor says, the power of the mayor, okay, if there is, of course, an appeal process by which that resident can come to the staff and the city council and says, I think I'm being singled out for X, Y, Z reason, and I would like to appeal, and I want to make sure that, there is a process by which everybody is going to be treated the same way. So the success of the ordinance is going to be only if it is applied to everybody exactly in the same way. If it is not applied to everybody exactly in the same way, then we're going to run into abuse issues and into non-compliance or failures of the ordinance. So, for just trying to understand what the issues are, I think this is the best step that we can do at this moment. I also do think that we do have other channels in which when there is flat out no compliance and a $25 fine is not going to bring compliance, and even a $7,000 lien on the property taxes will finally, pay the city back, that's another avenue that we take, and we have taken that avenue in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. With regard to Councilmember Lingel's issue, for assisting a homeowner, we do currently have a program through CDBG for a home repair program. I don't think there's anyone here that could talk about it, but I think maybe you're familiar with it. The other question I think was raised by council member, and I'll come to you guys in a second. I'm just going to try to clarify a couple things. With regard to narrowing the application of this, and I would just ask the city attorney in a general sense, what this is principally designed for is to address 17-140.010 nuisances. To Councilmember Costa's question, what wider area would this typically be used for based on the other cities that you've been involved in? Or is it principally a nuisance?
Most cities use it for zoning code compliance and nuisance kinds of things, which is what's identified by the section that's attached as exhibit as attachment 3, and the way the ordinance is set up is Mr. Boggs won't have authority to issue any citation until the city administrator issues him something in writing saying you're authorized under this and here's the codes that you can issue a citation under. So if the council would like to see us do this in a stepped approach, maybe a suggestion could be is have the city administrator only issue that authority for section 17-140.010 violations. I just want to say that may be good today. It may be a little too limiting, so I don't know that I would be able to say these are all the code sections that I think we should at least as a minimum have Mr. Boggs have the authority to issue citations for, but maybe that's at least a first step that you may want to think about taking. And then if I could just add one additional thing, because of a comment that Councilmember Martin made, I just want to make sure everyone understands. The appeal process stops with the city administrator. It doesn't come to the city council.
Okay, well maybe what we could do is, I think the city administrator understands our concerns and would be judicious in giving her approval to various code sections. And again, I'm thinking of that particular property we had many years ago where we ran out of tools with that property owner, and this might have been a tool that might have solved that problem. And that one had to do with health and safety issues with the building, and basically they just blew us off. And if every 30 days they were racking up a $500 fine, we probably would have got his attention an awful lot sooner. So I guess based on the way you say it, I'm less concerned, and maybe Councilmember Costa is now too. Go ahead.
Marilyn, only if you do it in the stepped approach, but it doesn't sound like that's what council is going to be recommending.
Well, I don't know. We could chat with city administrator in a minute, but let me give the guys a shot. Who's first? Dirk? Councilmember Starbuck.
You know, going back a few years, we didn't have full-time code enforcement. You know, we've made a job. We've got full-time code enforcement. I think this council is ready to make the turn here to go from reactive to proactive. And, you know, the fining part, I don't see that being a big issue really, because I think most people are going to go ahead and take care of these problems. You know, this isn't going to be something where we're going to go out and just slam the town with a whole bunch of fines.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Starbuck hit the key word there. It's proactive. I mean, we've been way too lenient for way too many years, and now we have a city that has many properties in disarray. I'd hate to live next to some of these properties that I drive down the street and look at. If it turns out, and we have Mr. Boggs sitting over here, and I think we all agree that he's going to be judicious in the way he issues citations, or with the help of the city administrator issues citations. But let's say 10 years down the road, Councilmember Costa said we're setting a standard here that we are going to have to live with for years to come. But every council will have the opportunity to change this. Next year, we may have this before us, we may change it to something else. So it's not that it cannot be changed. If it's not working, we can change it again. But I believe that we've sat on our thumbs way too long. I believe we have to become proactive. And the financial, even though I believe $25 probably is too little in most cases, it's not going to get them to fix their fence or garage door. But when they get the $100 fine, the $500 fine, I think then they will finally start looking at it and maybe make the effort to make their properties look better, and in the end result, making our city look better.
City Administrator, at this time, is it your intention to expand Mr. Boggs' authority beyond 17-140 except in special cases?
Mr. Mayor and Council, the intent of this is to enforce the provisions of 17.140.10, and it's for the cases when voluntary compliance is not achieved.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Once again, we don't know who will be sitting in the city administrator's seat many years to come, and intent can very easily be lost in the process. If it's not written into the code, is my honest opinion. And I think that I may have a different idea of what proactive means versus reactive. When there's a code, you react to that. Being proactive for me is attempting to not have those things happen in the first place. But that's not where the council is moving. So I think really at this point, there's just a fundamental difference in opinion in regards to policy. And so with that, Mayor, I request that the recommendation by city staff is actually put into 3 separate votes, A into 2 separate votes, and B its own additional third vote.
Sure. Which one would you like to move?
I mean, I'm comfortable moving approval of the information program consisting of a copy of Lompoc Municipal Code, Section 17.140.010, being included in the city utility bill mailings, as well as the door hangers explaining what constitutes a violation and indicating an administrative citation can be issued if voluntary compliance is not achieved. But I thought we were going to do it in order, so that way somebody else would need to move that first recommendation. Does that make sense?
I have to confess, you have lost me.
If I may,
yeah.
What I hear Councilmember Costa saying is it would be helpful for how she was doing this for someone else to make a motion to introduce the ordinance, have that be seconded, have a vote on that, and then Councilmember Costa would probably be okay with doing the second half of A and B.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, where am I splitting this so I get it right? Draw a line.
The third line down.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion.
Can you move lines 1 through 3?
No, I was just going to make a motion. I was going to recommend the council adopt ordinance number 1584-12, attachment 1, and waive further reading and introduce the proposed ordinance relating to administrative fees.
I second.
Okay, that's what we were trying to do. Got it. I'm still writing, I'll catch up. I have to understand what I wrote when this is all over. Okay, so we're moving what he said. Is there any other discussion? Could we vote, please? And that passes 4 in favor, 1 opposed. And now, Councilmember Costa, if you would like to move from there on.
Thank you, Marilyn. I move that we approve the information program consisting of a copy of Lompoc Municipal Code, Section 17.140.010, being included in the city utility bill mailings as well as door hangers, and also review and approve the form letter from the mayor's office with mechanical and digital signature to be included with certain nuisance code violation enforcement letters to property owners, citing the edits that we made.
3 letters.
Excuse me, 3 letters, citing the edits that we made this evening as well.
I'll second.
Wait a minute. Yeah, got it. Okay. Just making sure.
My understanding was that there is 2 letters. Where's the third letter?
I passed out the third one. That was the financial institution one.
Oh,
There's 1 letter, 2 letters from the mayor and 1 letter from staff that's going to go with the informational. It's attachment
3.
Yeah, attachment 3.
oh, that's the third letter. So it's not the one that he just passed to the
No,
financial.
that's one of the 3.
That's
When he
one
just
of the
passed out
3.
is one of the 3.
There was one included,
Yeah.
one mayor letter, then there's the next financial institution mayor letter, and then there's the attachment 3 general letter.
And wasn't there a discussion that the financial letter should go also to commercial properties?
Yes, and that's
Okay.
incorporated in the motion, along with the changes that we made in discussion. You did say with the changes we made. Yes, you did. Okay. And I'm sorry, who was the second? Okay. What she said is moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, can we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. And look, it worked already. We have a declaration of nuisance and abatement order, item number 10. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here tonight, well, I should say my name is Jeff States, Fire Chief, pardon me. I'm here tonight to present the staff report on our annual weed abatement program that your fire department oversees. We have inspected each of the properties on the attached list, Exhibit A, and there's 112 that are listed on there. But to proceed with the abatement program, you, the City Council, must determine such conditions exist and set a public hearing to hear objections to the weed removal. You're being requested to set that public hearing for the June 5th, 2012 City Council meeting. At the June 5th Council meeting, if you determine the nuisance condition exists, then you can order the abatement by removal of the weeds by the property owners, and failing that, by the city, with a cost of an administrative fee and of removal assessed against the properties as a lien upon the properties until paid. At least 7 days prior to the public hearing, a notice to abate the weeds and debris will be sent to all owners of listed parcels, informing them of the public hearing date, administrative fee, and our abatement procedures. After the June 5th public hearing, each property owner of a parcel declared a public nuisance will receive a notice informing them of the council's order to abate, potential administrative costs, and the final date before the city is forced to abate and remove the nuisance from the listed lots. Adoption of the resolution will also address the regrowth of weeds. Staff's recommendation is the City Council adopt Resolution 5776, 2012, declaring certain parcels of property as public nuisance by virtue of weed growth or by the accumulation of rubbish, refuse, and dirt pursuant to Government Code Section 39560 through 39588. That ends my report.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Chief States, certain properties are listed as letters sent and certain properties do not have letters sent. What's the difference between these properties?
On our list?
Correct.
Actually, the list you have before you, we sent letters. Well, there's 4 lots on there that are actually owned by the city. So we didn't, those were put on our list just as a reminder to us to drive by and look at them, because we do receive citizen complaints on city-owned property. But the 108, a courtesy letter has already been sent to all of them.
Even if it doesn't have letters sent listed on the list?
Yes.
Great. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that the City of Lompoc and the Redevelopment Agency of Lompoc have some listed on here. My hope is that we can get those taken off promptly.
Yes.
Thank you.
They won't appear on the next list.
Which one of you guys had the Councilmember Starbuck?
I think we should send them a mayor's letter.
Councilmember Starbuck, you're just plainly out of order. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief states on page 7, the fourth property down, that's the 409 South C Street. This is one that last year we spent $7,000 cleaning it up. Isn't there something we can do that when we see, after we spend the money to get it cleaned up, a month later, 2 months later, that they're just ignoring it? Do we have to go through this process every single year, send letters? I mean, can we put, yes.
If I may, through the mayor, if there's more weeds within the same calendar year, then we don't have to use this process. But if it's after this calendar year, then we have to do the process again.
So 3 months from now, if this property has weeds growing in excess, we can go in and get it cleaned up.
We just need to send them a postcard saying do it, or we're going to come do it, and if they don't, we can go do it.
So it's within the calendar year?
Yes. And
Okay.
that particular property hasn't cut
I'm
the
sorry?
weed. That particular property hasn't cut the weeds yet, so.
No, I know. Thanks.
Okay. No lights lit, so we'll give you a break. Now we have an opportunity for public comment on this. Is there anyone who would like to public comment on this? Going once, going twice, no sale. Okay, come on back to council. Are there any questions or discussion on this? Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember the last year we changed this and we agreed that we were not just going to do vacant lots, that we were going to look at all properties, correct? So I guess I'm just having a confusion here because everything that I read in this list, it says weeds on vacant lot.
Yes, but the government code covers weeds, rubbish, dirt, refuge. There's 3 actual. 1128 North A is on the list, 409 South C,
Okay.
and 1219 West Prune.
I guess
Asked by the
it's
attorney's
just
office to put that one on there.
confusing because the case name is weeds on vacant lot. I mean, if there's a house on it, it's not a vacant lot. So I'm kind of confused what this is about.
If I may, through the mayor.
Yes.
The form needs to be changed. We need to take out vacant lots from,
Yeah.
that description shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally wrong because this is implying that, I mean, basically just says, are we still just looking at vacant lots? No, I'm sure we're not. But the form hasn't been updated to reflect that we're dealing with other properties as well, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Because they were just added this year onto our list.
I just wanted to make sure that we're doing that.
Yes.
Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, I'd accept the motion. Okay, seeing no one, I'll make the motion. I move. Oh, you want? Okay, go ahead. You were late. Go ahead.
I move that we adopt Resolution 5776-12, declaring certain parcels of property as public nuisance by virtue of weed growth by the accumulation of rubbish, refuse, and dirt pursuant to Government Code Section 39560 through 39588.
And a second.
So move.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on item 10? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you. And now, item 11. Capital expenditure appropriations for recreational facilities at Dick Deweese Community Senior Center. Management Service Director Brad Wilkie is still in the back. We're too fast for him. He should come running out any minute now. He thought we were going to talk longer. Yeah, we could move on to item 13, 14, 15, council reports. We can get a little of those going on. We'll give them just a minute. Everybody stand up and take a stretch. That's what we'll do. Item 11, Brad.
Apologize for that. The delay on the web is a little bit longer than I thought I could get back out here.
We're just too fast for you.
Mayor, council members, this item is being brought to you to kind of accommodate we're kind of in the middle of a transition between having expenditures for the purposes of completing the projects that are part of our bond for the RDA, between what used to be the RDA and transitioning to the successor agency. This request is to just kind of to bridge that time difference so that we can continue to secure the items that we need to finish up the projects, and also allow us the necessary time to have the various approvals that are needed, that are now needed because we're under AB 26 for approval that goes beyond the successor agency. And this is just basically timing. We're expecting to have these funds approved to come out of our bond proceeds. This is just to bridge us between getting the projects done and being able to get that request through the Oversight Committee.
So what you're saying is we need our chairs when it's sit on the floor.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
And the next item after this, we will be talking about the July through December enforceable obligation schedule that needs to be approved by the successor agency and the Oversight Board and the Department of Finance. And this is just in some degree related to that.
Okay. Are there any questions for Brad at this time? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. What fund is 24560-73070?
Well, the fund itself, 24 is the fund, is AB 1600 fees in this particular case. It has other funds in it besides that, but this is coming from AB 1600 recreation facilities. The same one that we were using in the item earlier in the evening.
So this capital expenditure is different from the capital expenditure from consent calendar item 6?
It's from the same bucket of money, so to speak, but it's being charged to a different program just to keep them separate.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, this was a concern of mine. We're going to build this beautiful facility, and all of a sudden we're not going to be able to move in because we don't have any tables and chairs and everything. So I understand this is for the tables, the chairs for the public use. I'm hoping the answer to my question is going to be no. Someone's not going to be coming back to us in a week, a month from now, saying we need desks for the offices, computers for the offices, pots and pans for the kitchens. Is that correct?
Well, like I said earlier, this is really just, we're in a awkward in-between time. We're expecting to have approval by the Oversight Board to allow us to finish up the projects. And with that approval, we'll be able to not do this again. So right now, we're just between that approval process and not having that approval. If for some reason the Oversight Board doesn't approve it, we can look at it from a different point of view at that point in time to get things finished.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I have difficulties with this based on the discussion that went on at the closed session regarding the dissolution of RDA and what the scenarios could be of whatever the new agency decides to do. So without having without going into a lot of detail on that very confusing subject, because it's not clear what the legislation is going to do or how the legislation is going to be interpreted and what is going to be the effect that will have on us as far as what monies we can spend. It's difficult to approve this right now without knowing really that are we going to have to return this money, or is it really going to come out of the general funds at the end of the day? Furthermore, the point that was just raised that it may not be just 30,000 for tables and chairs. It may be computers and desks and perhaps other projects that were supposed to be there were supposed to be monies there, but now because of RDA being dissolved, it's not clear who's going to get that loot, if you wish. Okay, so I'm having a hard time approving one thing without really knowing where the money is going to come from. Yeah. Right now, it's supposed to come from these funds and from these bonds, but if I understand, this new processor agency may decide to either sue the cities or do this or do that, and therefore we might actually have to bring those monies from some other fund at the end of the day.
And that's actually why I'm proposing this to come out of AB 1600 fees. So at the point in time when it is approved by, or not approved by the successor agency's oversight board, these items that have already been bought will be able to pay for those. And in the future,
these are items that have already been bought? I guess I'm confused.
We went out and furnished, some of the furnishings that are in the Dick Dewey Center were ordered after February 1st. And right now, looking back at the RDA, we have budgeted amounts in the bond proceeds to pay for furniture. But since these were obligated after February 1st, the successor agency technically has the approval. They have to approve the purchase of this out of RDA bond proceeds. Mm-hmm. This is to allow us to pay for the items that we obligated after February 1st in anticipation of getting that approval by the oversight board on May 7th, so we can then reimburse this fund out of bond proceeds.
Well, but you're assuming that you're going to be approved. What if you're not? Then we're taking this money out of AB 1600, right? And we're not going to be able to put it back.
Well, that is better than not having any place to do it, because the city has already obligated ourselves to pay for it. I'm just recommending a place to pay for it in the time, at this point in time, so we can actually pay the vendors. And then we'll look to get the fund reimbursed out of bond proceeds. So
my question to you, is there any other fund that would be less impact? Okay, so you chose AB 1600, as whatever, your judgment. Can you provide some information if you're not approved and that fund is not going to be replenished with these monies, what would be the impact? And is there any other funds within the city that will suffer less impacts or more impacts? I mean, what I'm trying to get at, was your judgment call the right one? I'm sure it was, but I would like to find evidence that it was. Okay.
Well, if we take off the table right now that this is not a bond-funded program, the purchase of these items is an eligible activity of AB 1600 expenditures.
Okay.
AB 1600 expenditures are there to provide for capital improvements to facilities, in this case, recreation facilities. We could always take the money from other eligible areas. One would be from the recreation fund, that is the community center enterprise fund, but it has to operate from proceeds that it gets from renting the facility. So for the time being, that's fairly limited until we get up to speed. And it's to run the facilities. It's not necessarily to replace the facility. It's to run operations within the facility. Another option would be just straight right out of the general fund, which I don't think is a very enticing option, just because we have the general fund is stressed like it has been for the last 4 or 5 years. So this is, to me, a better option than those other two.
And what, as far as the AB 1600, what other capital expenditures were there that we're not going to do because we're doing this?
The AB 1600 report does not identify specific projects or specific items to be spent out of the proceeds that are generated by impact fees. So it's, in this particular case for recreation facilities and recreation activities, it's fairly generous because we don't have, like for street improvements, we have specific streets and specific intersections that will be improved by the funds that are collected for streets. In this case, we know we have general needs throughout the city for recreation, and it's at the discretion of the city council to spend those as deemed appropriate. So.
Right, and I'm sorry to belabor the point, but wasn't part of this when we were talking about doing park improvements, and one of the issues that came up was the restrooms at Ryan Park?
Mm-hmm.
And so would that impact that? Because I believe that we were earmarking like, $200,000 for the improvements of the restrooms.
Well, we had earmarked some current RDA tax increment for that project. Tax increment does no longer exist for the use of the RDA for capital improvements. So that earmark that was in the RDA 11-12 budget is no longer, it's just, it evaporated when AB 26 was enforced. The other opportunity we have for Ryan Park restrooms that's been identified are CDBG funds. And to some extent, there are some assessment district funds that would be earmarked for that as well, but that's looking to CDBG to pay for the bulk of it, which is something down the road, and also a council discretionary decision.
So kind of the bottom line is we're ready to spend this money, but because of the dissolution of the RDA, we're not clear where this money is going to come from, and now you are proposing to get it out of these funds because we have to pay this money.
Yeah,
because we're ready to spend the money.
Yeah, we
right?
already. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, could you comment on this particular AB 1600 fund, the recreation fund, that what it can be used for? For instance, it could not be used for restrooms.
Restrooms are really it's probably a little bit, you can probably look at it from a few different ways, but from my point of view, a restroom is in a park is part of the park infrastructure, so it would probably be more appropriate for park improvement fees as opposed to recreation facility fees. You might be able to argue that it's part of the recreation in the park, but I believe that the impact fee study that was done in 2003 looked for actual true recreation type facilities to receive those funds. The Anderson Rec Center, the Dick Dewey Center,
the
pool, those kind of activities.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. So understanding that this is contingent upon the approval by the Oversight Board, which at this point is unclear whether they will approve it or not, I think what council has to ask yourselves is if you're comfortable with those monies coming out of Fund 24, the AB 1600 fees, which for myself at this point I am. But I think that this begs a more important question is, did the city get itself into any other obligation after February 1st, besides the purchase of these items?
We've been trying to work with the various departments to catch things like this that were after the fact. There may be some others that we didn't know about that way. That's why this is $30,000, because the furniture that we bought to outfit the Dewey Center was in the neighborhood of $2,000 to $3,000. So this is to capture some of those things that we missed, and I don't expect it to be more than this, but we did notice there were some that we were trying to, the recreation department was trying to get it so they can have an operational facility, and rightfully so. It's a facility that's 99% done, and they want to have activities in there as soon as possible, start generating revenue. So we have a conundrum between trying to get the project done, AB 26 tossed on top of that, and trying to run a well-made city asset to generate revenues that will continue it going forward.
Great. So the Oversight Board meeting will be on May 7th, the next meeting, is that correct?
Yes.
And so if that is approved, then anything that was missed will be okay. My concern is that if the schedule of obligations is not approved, that anything that we missed, you're going to have to bring back to council for additional funding. So, you know, I'm asking staff to be very diligent in paying attention to these things and not spending the money and then coming and requesting funds afterward, because that would be a big concern for myself. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Now, I'd like to remind council that these developmental impact fees are probably the most restricted money that we use. They're very, very specific. So to obligate these to cover the debt and tell the Oversight Board, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with it, but like you said, you have $3,000 to $4,000 already committed in this, so you've got a pretty good contingency in here, so the chances of you coming back to us are relatively slim on this.
For this, yeah, correct. For these kind of things, yeah. If we have to come back because the Oversight Board did something unexpected, that's a whole different question and a whole different scenario of responses.
Okay. Let's take a quick second here. Anyone out there want to have public comment on this item?
City Council, Charles Summer. My question is that is the city just going to be paying a bill a week early when it could be paid next week with the oversight meeting?
The answer to that is this is the just in case it doesn't work out for us and we have something in place to go ahead and pay the bill. But
so,
even if we paid the bill and it was authorized, then we would reimburse ourselves for paying the bill.
Well, I understand reimbursing, but we're talking about a 3-month bill that will be possibly 1 week more due.
We can probably let Mr. Wilkie talk to that. So.
When we commit ourselves to a vendor, we also commit to paying those vendors in a fairly timely manner. And some of these things were bought in anticipation of the center's opening, but we're at the point in time when we might be, I don't know for sure on each and the individual item, but we may be up against that 45-day window of making payments to these vendors in a timely manner. So we want to be able to pay our vendors so we keep in good stead with them.
Thank you.
Mayor Lynn, I think you were correct in the sense that it's, if this goes back to the Oversight Board on May 7th and they say no and we haven't approved this, they'd have to come then back to us again for our approval, and by then we'd be way past due.
And in the practical sense, if we get that and we haven't actually charged the accounts, we'll be able to change it to charge the bond proceeds directly. So,
journal correction. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll come back to council. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'd accept a motion. Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept staff recommendations.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, Brad, number 12.
Some of this might be a little bit redundant, having just talked about AB 26 and the successor agency and the oversight board. As you may know, the state Supreme Court upheld AB 26 and tossed out AB 27, which would have been the companion bill that would have allowed us to continue operating RDAs as we operated up until the end of June of last year. Since that did not happen and the Supreme Court ruled about 6 months after the law was put in place, it put some pressures on timelines for submitting the required documents and the required approvals for the successor agency to get to the oversight board for the Department of Finance to approve our expenditures. We asked, I believe in late January or early February, to do an enforceable obligation schedule to approve that for the period of January through June of 2012, this period we're in right now. That EOPS or the ropes is being debated at the oversight board in 2 meetings in April, and we're going to continue working on it in the May 7th meeting. That is to allow us to spend tax increment money that we already received on projects that are enforceable obligations. What's in front of you today is the next 6-month period for July 1 through December 31st for the same type of items that are considered enforceable obligations. Since the redevelopment agency had a 1-year budget, there are several items that were on the ropes, that's the acronym we use, in the January through June period that will drop off because the MOUs or the various contracts have a finite 1-year period that goes along with the budget. This report is very much similar to the one that was done in January. It's broken down into several parts. The first one is items that are truly tax increment based that will come out of the money that will be provided to us in middle of June to pay for obligations in July through December. There's also a housing schedule and a bond schedule for the items that are still, what we think will still be obligations of the bond debt, bond proceeds at July 1. We don't know for sure if we're going to have all the projects completed by that time, so we're using this schedule as a backstop. And the final schedule is to outline the agency's administrative budget, which is through AB 26, allows us $250,000 a year of tax increment to pay for winding down the agency. That's split up between the 2 6-month periods, so this request right here will be for $125,000. And the next one that we do probably in October-ish will be for the remainder of the $250,000. The reason it's coming to you today rather than earlier is it does have some relationship to the ropes that was approved for January through June. In an ideal world, we would have already had that approved. The Department of Finance would have already given their blessing on what's on that schedule. And the Supreme Court's delay in their upholding this law squeeze things a bit. So we are bringing it today to you because it needs to be to the Oversight Board and approved by the Oversight Board by, I believe, May 15th. And it has, at that point in time, it has to go to the county auditor and the Department of Finance. And the Department of Finance will have to bless it before we get tax increment in June. This is a little bit more important than the one we did in January through June because our ability to make our debt payments on the 2 outstanding bonds, the 2010 bond and the 2004 bond, will require us to have the money on hand as of June 30th so that we can make the payments in September. If we don't get it from the county auditor in June, we will actually be in default on our bond covenants because the bond covenants require us to have enough money on hand in the city to pay those 2 bond payments in September. I believe that the state and the Department of Finance understand that part and will do their due diligence to get the approval of those items back to the county auditor in time for them to make the disbursement of the new trust funds to us so we have the money on hand in June. Their request right now is to ask for the council acting as the successor agency board to approve this schedule and request that we take it to the oversight board meeting on the 7th of May and pending their approval to send it to the Department of Finance and county auditor hopefully by May 11th. So.
Any questions at this time? Any public comment at this time? No public comment. Back to the council.
I do apologize for the size of the schedules. That's what happens when you take a schedule from the state and squeeze it down to 8.5 by 11, so it's somewhat small. So,
any discussion from the council? Last chance. A motion, please. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I move that the successor agency adopt the ROPS and post the schedule on the city's website, direct staff to deliver the ROPS to the oversight board of the successor agency, to the former Lompoc redevelopment agency for approval. The required obligations payment schedule is required to be delivered to the Santa Barbara County Auditor Controller, to the State Controller, and to the State Department of Finance by May 11th, 2012, and authorize staff from time to time to modify the required obligations payment schedule pursuant to ABX 126.
And a second.
I'll go ahead and second it.
And any further discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, written communications. None. Oral communications, your last chance to talk to us for 2 minutes. Seeing no one rise, none. Council requests, comments, and meeting reports. And Bob and I have some fun ones, so we'll give everybody else a chance first. Councilmember Martner.
I have nothing to report, Mayor.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Along with everybody else on the council, we were all in attendance at the grand opening for the Dick Dewey Senior and Community Center. That evening, Ms. Barcelona and I attended the League of California Cities Channel Counties quarterly dinner, which was a cost to the city of $35. I paid for my gas to get there and back. And then I was also the next morning at the YMCA grand opening, many other meetings, but those were the 3 main events for the last 2 weeks. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Just real briefly, I wanted to comment that I was at the Corley Awards at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and what a great event that always is to be out there. I attended an oil industry brief over in Santa Maria with the Northern Economic Development Alliance, and obviously the community center, which was really a fun time. So that was it.
And I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem for covering a whole bunch of appointments for me while Bob and I were off. And
well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor indicated, he and I were in Washington, D.C. this past week. I believe we left at, you picked me up at 3 a.m.
3 a.m., yes.
3 a.m. on Saturday, and we returned late Thursday night. Actually, the meeting was probably one of the more productive meetings that I've attended with NCPA. Oh, and by the way, there was no city funds spent on my trip. It was paid for by NCPA. Probably one of the more productive trips. We met with several of the senators and congresspeople that were the next day or that week voting on several bills that would have significant impact on the funds with NCPA. At one of the meetings, there was a representative, I forget her name, she spoke to us about a letter that was written by the Secretary of Energy, Dr. Lowe, and this letter was going to almost go around the Congress's authority to administer fees for utilities. What we were requesting is that before they implement these fees, they at least speak to the stakeholders. They had not even spoke to the Congress about this, which the Congress had the responsibility to do this. We're just requesting that they speak to us, speak to Congress before they implement any of these fees. That week was also known as Cyber Week in Washington. We were not objecting to anything that the Congress wanted to do. What they want to do is protect our network, or grid, power grid throughout the United States. Probably a very vulnerable aspect of our security. You can think if a terrorist wanted to interrupt the operations, can imagine what they'd do if they'd shut down the power grid throughout the United States. So we admire their attempt to protect this grid. However, the 17 cities that are members of NCPA, we have already spent millions of dollars protecting our grid. What we're asking is that don't try to recollect money from us. We've already put in millions of dollars protecting our grid. If there's unprotected grids, get the people that use those grids, spend their money. And let's see, there was another...
the bond.
The bonds, yeah. What the government wants to do is they want to eliminate tax-free bonds. And we understand, possibly they're saying, well, the rich are the people that can afford to invest in these bonds, and there's another loophole for them to avoid taxes. Again, we, members of NCPA, say, think about this before you do this. Before you eliminate these tax-free bonds, think about this. This is one of our major ways of raising funds to develop our power plants. We're not doing it because we're rich. We're doing it to generate some revenue so we can build these things. So we ask them, just stop and think what you're doing before you implement this. And I believe we've made some headway at these meetings. Like I say, it was a very productive meeting. Long meetings. I think this was the first time that I think jet lag took effect on me. I was supposed to go to dinner one night, and I fell asleep at 6 o'clock, woke up at 9:30, dinner was over. So anyway, Mr. Mayor.
And I think one of the other points, there are two regulatory agencies. There's FERC and NERC, and we have worked through their process through the NCPA with regarding cybersecurity and basic network security. And protocol number 5 is nearing completion to be adopted. And one of the things that we said to them is, hey, we in the electric industry have been working on this for years, and we're already up to version 5. Why don't you go regulate somebody else that hasn't done anything yet? And in our case, would you please recognize FERC and NERC as our process so that we don't have to start all over again? Now, I did travel at the city's expense, and part of the reason was NCPA wanted some more mayors there, because it seems like representatives kind of perk up when they hear the word mayor. But along the way, it occurred to me that a couple days before, talking to Congressman Galligley's rep, that it might be the golden opportunity to speak to our friends at FEMA about the floodplain. And so I asked Tom Woodrow to check with the congressman, and he talked to them back in Washington. It seems that Congressman Galligley has a very good relationship with FEMA because he's helped them. And so on Monday morning, they made an arrangement for Bob and I to meet with them on Tuesday afternoon. And we were kind of expecting the third junior assistant to nobody to talk to us. But who we received was the deputy director of FEMA, who is responsible for all the floodplain maps in the United States. And so I sat in my hotel room Sunday madly creating some information to share with them, and I'll share it all with you now so that you have it. And this dealt with the floodplain and various things that have changed since the original flood maps were created. And I think we got in the door solidly, and we talked about several issues that are very important. One would be taking the 69 flood out as one of the floods that would be counted, and I think we got all the way down the road on that. The next one was discussing the changes that occurred in the floodway and how that had affected the floods. And if you read this whole thing I gave you, you'll understand it, but probably what you want to do when you're ready to go to sleep. And then the last one, and I don't think we made any points with that, was considering the dam current operating procedures as an amendment to the flood zone. And so they listened to, I think we were there an hour plus. We had the director, the senior engineer, the director's assistant, and then the gopher came and went. And at the end of the day, they basically said, well, you have three choices. Number one, you can ask us to study this, and we don't have any money and we don't have any time, so it won't be very soon. Number two, you can send us the information you think we should have, and it'll be wrong, and we won't really look at it, but we'll be polite about it. Or number three, we'll tell you what it is that we want for our study, and if you complete the study in the manner in which we want it completed and you give it to us, we'll look at it quite promptly. So we voted for option number three, and sometime this week I expect to get some information from FEMA with regard to what they will need to review our floodplain, and then that will allow us to talk to the individual from Penfield and Smith who did the Riverside washout study for us, and get an idea from him what it's going to cost to complete the information they need, and then we'll come back to council and go, here's our opportunity, or not such a good opportunity. And then kind of serendipitous, the individual that came in right behind us at FEMA and signed in with the city of Visalia or Vacaville, I forget, it starts with a V, was a former lobbyist on behalf of the city who saw Bob's and my name on the list and promptly called the city administrator and said, hey, you guys need help? I'm doing a lot of FEMA work now. So we really got a lot of resources, and that was by far and away the high point of this, other than I think what Bob said, we had a lot of effect. Ms. Azar from the Department of Energy, we probably didn't feel too good after listening to her. But as we went through all of the meetings after that, it was clear that, and realized we were there with the American Power Association. There were a large number of cities and power districts there lobbying Congress. It was clear as time went on that they were becoming concerned about the Secretary of Energy's memo and what the potential costs were, and the fact that basically the Secretary of Energy was trying to go around congressional authority and basically violate the charter of the Federal Power Administrations. So we came home feeling really good that we'd done a great job. We also dropped off some letters with the people that we met with regard to the bill to save TAP TV. And outside of that, I had 12 meetings and events, and we came home tired, but life was good. That's all I have to report. We will be adjourned to a joint meeting with the Airport Commission at 6:30 on May 15th. I don't think so. Hold that thought. Don't go away. Okay, that is correct. Go ahead and go away. Thank you for joining us.